Traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
And we are live. Caleb Rose, we have finally made it to the podcasting studio. It's been probably like 4 or 5 months in the process now, and I always know these conversations are great whenever things seem to just keep coming up that prevent us from pressing record. So here we are. So my first question, I guess, is, are you ready to strip down and dive in?
Yes. As you know, I am the podcast host of Skinny Dipping, so I am always ready to strip down and dive in on the deep conversations. And also to the point you made, I totally agree that when it keeps getting pushed off, like there is this reason, there is this divine time. And actually, when we first chatted, I was in my other house and I actually just moved back in with my family for a couple months. And I'm so grateful that I'm in this space to have this conversation now, because when I'm in my home, like the home I grew up in, I feel like I literally return home to my soul. Like I'm physically returning home, but also metaphorically. I felt like at that last place, I was just like a little lost. So I'm really glad that this is the moment that we are having this conversation, because I feel so ready. I feel so ready for it. And I'm so ready to strip down and dive in. Thank you for that. Thank you, Clayton.
I think it's a beautiful little intro quip that you have with your podcast, and maybe that's where we can start. Like you said, beginning of Skinny Dipping. What was like the idea behind that name? Like, what happened there for it to be a
Yeah.
spiritual podcast? Like, it's kind of promiscuous, if you will.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Well, it's such a thing with like also brand marketing. Like my friend is like launching this yerba company and they're calling it Benny, and they're like saying it's like be friends with Benny, like friends with benefits. Like there's something about something that's like promiscuous and almost like sexual that really does catch people's attention. So from a marketing standpoint, I mean, that wasn't the intention, but it's really transferred into that. But actually, I started the podcast with a friend of mine, and we were sitting in our backyard at the time. We were roommates, and our other best friend and his boyfriend were in town visiting, and we were all hanging out in the backyard. To be honest, we were like smoking some weed, just chilling, like really just like having like a good powwow, and we were brainstorming ideas. And it was actually our mutual best friend, Kaimana, who's been my best friend since I was like 10 years old. Like he is my gay best friend. Like we are just complete soulmates. Like if he was straight, we would be together, because I'm just like, I love you. Like I was so in love with him when we were growing up. It's actually so funny. But basically he was like, we're talking about like getting naked almost. We were like, yeah, like it's like when you're having an intimate conversation and it's vulnerable, like you're just like getting naked. And we were just like joking around and literally just like shooting the shit, joking around. And he was like, oh, like skinny dipping. And both me and my friend who I started the podcast with, we looked at each other and we were like, that's it. We were just like, that's it. And then it transferred into us like making jokes around like stripping down and diving in on conversations. And it really just blossomed from this place of joy and this place of play into something that is actually like my entire life now, which is so crazy. And I'm really grateful that he's the one to have come up with that concept, because when kind of rebirthing the podcast and switching hands from me doing it with somebody else to me doing it by myself, it really felt good to know that the other person that I started the podcast with didn't even like help me really come up with that idea. It was actually like a third party, which really helped me detach from the old version of the podcast and step into the rebirth, because I debated like, should I change the name? Should I change the name for the energetic perspective? And I was just like, no, skinny dipping is right. And the fact that my best friend in the entire world since I was 10 years old, Kaimana, came up with the name, and it just like clicked and it just like hit. It was just like a full body fuck yes. And I think when you feel that full body fuck yes, like you just have to go with it. So that's kind of like the story behind the name. I've never talked about that before. So that's so funny. I love it.
Well, though we brought it on the Traveling to Consciousness special here.
Is that your thing? You're like, let's talk about something we've never talked about.
It honestly happens quite frequently. And it's kind of interesting because usually it doesn't happen till later in the conversation because people just haven't been on enough like long form podcasts where people just get like the bullet points, the kind of quips in like the first hour. But then after the first hour is usually whenever it's like, oh, I've never talked about that before. Oh, I've never discussed that before. Oh, I've never made that connection before. And those are the moments where I'm like, oh, yes, like that's
I
what my
mean, as
podcast
a
here to do.
host, yeah, as a host, that is like such a special gift. If you have that gift to bring certain stories out of people, it shows that you give them enough comfortability that they can really dive into themselves beyond the surface, you know? So I think that's a really special gift for you as a host. And that's something you should really hold on to.
I love it. I'll make sure to hold on to it. And also, if anyone's listening, keep a counter of how many skinny dipping references are brought up because you just said dive in again. So let's see if that's a
I
recurring theme.
always say it.
Yeah.
I always say to dive in, like, it just makes sense, and I've even heard, people's podcasts that were inspired by mine, like, they started listening to my podcast, and then they created their own. I have a couple girls in my community who have been very inspired by the podcast and then created their own, and then I'll, like, listen to it because I wanna, like, hear, and they'll use, like, terms like, "Okay, let's dive in," and I'm like, "Wait, that makes me so happy." Like, let's spread the skinny dipping love.
That's amazing. It's amazing too. I There's an interesting corollary that you kind of brought up there that I never mentally made the connection before. Is you were talking about how skinny dipping in, the sexual promiscuous nature is just embedded in advertising, right? Like it gets people to click. It probably got me to click whenever I first saw it. I was like, oh, what's this? What's this? Oh, there's a beautiful woman on the cover, like basically naked. Like why is my dopamine going? Why is my serotonin going? I probably should click this. And also what kind of comes up is the idea of vulnerability and being naked and how I think you just made a podcast episode about this, about how powerful vulnerability is. And I know I've created that myself, but it's in my opinion a very interesting conundrum here where we're very aroused and want to gravitate towards marketing that is sexual, that is naked, that is nudity, but yet at some level it's so difficult as a collective level to be vulnerable and to be emotionally naked with other people.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the point is when we are on these mics, when we're having these conversations, when we are showing our heart to the world, it is the most vulnerable process because first of all, you have no idea what is going to come out of your mouth sometimes. Like you're like, "Wait, I said that?" Like that's crazy. Like lots of times I don't even remember what I say, especially in solo sessions. But also in interviews. Sometimes I don't even remember what I say and I'm like, "I said that?" Like I don't even know because I'm just like channeling
Mm,
through whatever needs to come through and to just speak from your subconscious and to speak from a place where you're not thinking. Like you're not thinking about what you're saying. You're not letting the ego get in the way of what your heart wants to say. That is the most vulnerable process because you almost don't even know what is inside you until you start speaking it out loud. And I think with skinny dipping, that's really been the biggest blessing that it's brought into my life that I get an opportunity to fully be myself. And somebody who is a Gemini moon, who has a tendency to overthink things almost to a point where I will completely own my shit. That's like a thing I talk about on my podcast. Own my shit and admit that like sometimes I'm a little too smart for my own good and I can like manipulate the way that I say things or manipulate the way that I appear to like, you know, make somebody think a certain way about me or you know what I mean? I mean, we all do it to an extent. It's just who's willing to admit it.
mm.
And I think that when I'm on the mic, it's just so vulnerable and so real and I'm not thinking about how other people perceive me. I'm literally just speaking my truth. And it's like when you put the headphones on, you go into an entirely different universe. I mean, you knew traveling through the consciousness, like it is like an entirely different world when you put on like the over the ear headphones.
Yeah, I've had some guests who even ask, they're like, oh, do you want me to put on headphones or like not? Or like, I don't usually put them on. And I'm kind of just like if you've got them, you should put them on because it kind of locks you in a weird way.
It does. It really just makes you feel like you are in this present moment. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it, but you're just really grounded and centered and connected. It just like sucks you into the world that you are creating and experiencing through your words.
Yeah, it's like these headphones are some sort of portal or something. I don't know.
They
I
are.
don't know what's
They
going on
are,
there.
and you have the whole portal behind you. I'm, like, getting sucked into this moment.
Oh, dude, I love this thing. The pyramid. I'm assuming that's what you're referencing.
Yes, the
Yeah.
pyramid.
I
We're in
meditate
the
in this thing.
vortex.
Yeah,
Yes,
it feels weird when you meditate in this thing versus outside of it. There's definitely an extra energy of some sort.
I believe it, 100%.
Yeah, it really kind of gets you going. I don't know if it's placebo or if there's actual science behind it. I've seen some science, but it seems like it's almost older, like kind of in older texts they talk about the healing power of pyramids, and even like the ancient Egyptian pyramids were seen to be like a healing center for the royal families. And the dimensions are actually there's a book called The Law of One. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a channel text.
No.
It was
Oh,
I think it was like in the 70s or 80s maybe. This group of like five people channeled a being named Ra, and it was essentially the Ra that kind of like helped out Egypt and brought them up. And they talk about pyramids in there. And so like one of them was actually the geometry and the angles and the ratio of it is like key for the healing aspect and the energizing. So I was like, oh, what a perfect thing to put in while recording a podcast. That's probably
yeah.
ideal.
What is it called again? I'm gonna write it down.
Um, what is it called? I
The
mean,
t
it would be like a copper pyramid. Oh, the book, are you
Oh,
saying?
no, the book,
Oh, the
yeah.
Law of One. The raw materials, the Law of One. What's really cool is there's a website. I'll plug this website. I think it's like lawof1.info. Let me verify this. We were just talking about how I was going to look stuff up.
I mean, yeah, totally. Fact check it. I'm always down for the fact check.
Keep it
I,
legit.
like, have my little pyramid right here too that I always
Oh,
use.
it's a little
You
tiny
see it?
one. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, I definitely believe that the structure of the pyramid is a certain like vortex energy. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like it's like the peak and then like the groundingness and then like you're basically connected to the core of the earth and to the gods and the divine. So it really does make sense like and a lot of people, I mean, I don't know too much about it in detail to like fully but I have friends of mine who study like crystal geometry and like the ability to move energy in certain ways through the structure of the crystals. And I know for myself, I've always been guided when I'm picking crystals to either pyramids or to like pointed towers.
Mm,
And those are the ones that when I put them in my hand, I can like feel them vibrating in my palm. So I would definitely say that pyramids in general, just anything pointed up and then grounded to the earth, has a very special vortex energy that can like almost, it's almost like pulling the energy towards you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's like the epitome of channeling, right? It's like the concentrated vertices of it are putting into like one specific spot. And for the reference, yeah, the website is called lawof1.info. And it's super cool because in the search thing, you can just like type in keywords, because this text, it's huge. Like if you read the audiobook's probably like 30 hours or something, because
Wow.
yeah, they did a ton of channeling. So you can go to love1.info and then type in the search bar and like just type in pyramids, and it'll like pull out every single question and answer that has to deal with pyramids or with anything else that you're looking for. They even talk about
That's amazing.
Jesus. They talk about Jesus at one point. It's crazy.
Wow. No, I'm definitely going to look at that after this conversation. That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for. You have to let me know what you find there. What interesting facts you
Yeah.
find. Was Here's an interesting question I was just thinking of it. Like, speaking of Jesus, I know you're into spirituality. We're going to get into that whole past and the craziness I'm sure that came about with it. Have you found though, like in your journey, that there have been almost like established religions that have almost paralleled or kind of worked with the spirituality that you're finding? Because I know you've kind of dove in and you've talked about Reiki, you've talked about, I think, couple other different things. So is there like one religion, or has it been a little bit all over the place?
Yeah, so I actually didn't grow up with any sort of organized religion infringed upon me. So my mom grew up very Catholic in England, and my dad grew up very Jewish in California. And when they had me, they're very much so later in their lives, like second half of their lives. Both had been married before. My mom has like three other boys from another marriage. They're living like almost a second half of their life where they like moved to Maui and then like met each other. And I think they were just at a certain point in their lives where they both didn't practice any sort of type of religion. It wasn't like they were like atheist, but it wasn't like they necessarily believed in anything. It just really wasn't talked about. So I grew up in no form of organized anything spiritual, which is so interesting for where I'm at now, because I talk to so many people in my community about, the mostly the negative effects of like, Catholicism and Christianity, and like how the fear-based practices like made them afraid of something bigger than themselves, and having to unlearn and then relearn truly what divine love from God really is. But I myself, I'm very interested in it because I've never actually like experienced that. I almost felt like I was very much so a blank slate.
Mm.
And I still have a very hard time like even saying the word like God. Like even though I know like the God that I'm referring to is so different from the God that is used in masses to create fear-based control. Like I know that like cognitively, but still sometimes it like is difficult for me to say it off my tongue because I was like actually very kind of like against religion growing up because I just saw the negative impacts of it in people around me. So I have had this very interesting journey of never learning how to surrender, never learning how to trust in something bigger than myself, never learning how to pray. Like to pray, like I've been on my spiritual journey for like 4 years now, and I've only started to pray like in this last year. And because it was such a weird thing for me, I was like, I would always like talk to my guides and like talk to my angels and like talk to the universe, but never actually like sit there on my knees and like pray to God. I was like, who is this girl? Like, and it's very interesting because I feel like I've had this very unique perspective not a lot of people have, where nothing was infringed upon me. Like no, like my family wasn't atheist, they weren't religious, like it wasn't anything. And they weren't like spiritual. Like I feel like they believed in like, I don't know, higher powers. It's almost something that was never talked about with me and my parents, and we're very like, what's the word that I'm looking for, to ourselves on this island because we live on Maui and we don't have any other family here. So it's not like I was having influence of family. So things like ritual and prayer just was never something that I practiced. And it's actually been like a really difficult struggle for me. I'm really grateful that I'm a blank slate and I have this ability to have an open heart to everything that I'm learning because of it.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Revive CBD. Now I know what you're thinking, another CBD product, and typically I would completely agree with you. I've gone through all my trials and tribulations with CBD products, but this CBD cream is unlike anything else. Honestly, I don't know what it is, but there's something in the technology of it that it helps absorb into your skin and actually get to the place that aches and soothes your muscles almost instantaneously. It's close to instant. It's probably about a 5 to 10 minute activation that I've noticed, but sometimes it goes a little bit quicker. And so I know it can be difficult for find the right one. And this was my personal favorite that I had found after long enough. I don't want to go back to that dark time, but I found it. It works amazing. And the creator of it is an incredible guy. So I highly recommend you click the sponsors link below, click on the Revive CBD tab and get yours today. Revive CBD. Feel better, live better, all premium, all natural CBD products.
But also, the thought of trusting something bigger than myself has never been easy. And I actually like had a really, really bad fear of death. Like ever since I was little, like I'm a Scorpio rising, like those intrusive thoughts about death like kept me up. I was like literally 7 years old and I was like, I can't go to sleep. I'm like thinking about dying in like
Wow.
80 years. And I feel like that was directly correlated to not believing in anything. So yeah, we can dive into it whichever direction you think we should go. But like through my spiritual awakening and beginning to learn about past lives and also connecting to loved ones that have passed. Like my grandma has been a big person, my Jewish grandma,
Mm-hmm.
in my spiritual awakening. She's been such a big part of it because the first time I went to a medium, she immediately channeled through because she's like very close to me and like one of my guides. And when I started learning about her and then past lives, I read Many Lives, Many Masters, which is like one of my favorite books to ever exist. And um, I began to believe that there is no death. And still, I struggle with it, even though I know, even though I have so much proof that there is something beyond, like such specific proof of my grandma coming through and connecting with me and like reading books about past lives. And I've had quite a few experiences with like past life regressions that I'm just like, I can't make this shit up. Like this is real. Like I've existed before and I will exist again, and my soul is eternal. And it's so weird because I never used to believe that. Like I used to literally think like you just died and then it was it, and there was like blackness and it was like scary. I don't know.
It's always been interesting to me because even like in that mindset, right, of, if you believe that, first of all, if you're listening to this podcast and you believe that, kudos to you for being open-minded. But even more so, I always found that thought process interesting of like there's nothing. It's like it's kind of like that interesting of like, well, if there's nothing after, then there had to have been nothing before. So like how did I make this jump from nothing to a human back to nothing? It was always kind of like never sat well with me. But I do find it interesting how you have all that information, right? You have all this information. You've done the research. You've seen, I think we can even get into your own past lives at some point here, because I know that's always a fascinating discussion. And I've heard a couple of yours and they are fascinating. But the interesting thing about it, I find, is how it, even that knowing, it sounds like there's still that lack of trust in your voice. And even I can relate to it because in my, like, whenever I used to channel, I've kind of stopped channeling, which is a whole side conversation. But whenever I would channel, like I would get information, it would be like, hey, do this, do that. And I'd sit there and like be like, are you sure? Like, are you sure that's what I should do? And there's still that hesitation of like actually fully trusting that thing that you can't touch with your senses or feel with any of your senses, but it's there.
I know. And it's such an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know what specific downloads you were getting to do, but I've also realized that I went through a phase, and I still do it sometimes, but I went through a phase where I would ask for signs for like every decision that I needed to make. I'd be like, show me this specific number or show me this specific animal, like random things. Like one time I was like, oh, if I should randomly fly to New York tomorrow to like go to this gay pride parade with my friends, like show me a pink elephant. Like so like far out.
Yeah.
And then literally somebody like came in and they had a pink elephant on their shirt. And and then another example is I was like, should I break up with my boyfriend? Show me 444. And 2 seconds later, a car drove by 444. And both in those moments, I realized what I actually wanted to do. So even though the universe told me, yes, do it, like I'm showing you the sign, I've realized there is an infinite amount of timelines. So when we ask for signs, like I mean, I believe that there's an infinite amount of timelines, and like, you take one road and then it just you can go whichever way you want. And that is a beautiful thing because what is divinely meant for you in one moment might change in the next, depending on, you know, and simplicity, the butterfly effect of the world. And in both those moments, I got signs that I should do what I said that I wanted to do. And I got those signs, but I actually realized that I didn't want to do that. I realized in that moment, I didn't want to break up with my boyfriend. Like that actually, like that thought, like was so painful. And like I really felt like in that timeline, maybe us breaking up was the wrong thing. But then a month later, working through certain aspects, the timeline changes and like the divine thing to do also changes in that. So I don't know what kind of like messages like you were getting that you were, I don't know, because there's such this dynamic of like, I believe that we have free will. I don't know. Do you think we have free will?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I
Lots of people don't.
I think I think if you play out the fact that we don't have free will, I think it leads to a very nihilistic future. I think it leads to, well, if nothing matters and I have free will, then I can do whatever I want. And I think that's the end. At least this is where I've mentally gotten to it. And maybe if we both believe in free will, it's not the appropriate time to have the conversation. But where my mentality goes is like, if you make the argument that there's no free will, then I personally can go do whatever I want and nothing matters. And I think that that would lead to more people just doing whatever the hell they wanted. So I guess the question then becomes is am I saying that to am I saying that to prevent myself from believing it, or would I still, if I believe that, would I still be doing what I'm doing? Does that make sense? Because like if there was everything was determined, here's maybe a better way to put it. If everything was determined, there would be no reason to experience it. Because then what becomes
Mhm.
kind of the point, right? If we're
Yeah,
and I think that's a
I
big
totally agree.
cornerstone of this is that we humans are meaning making machines. So if everything's determined, then inherently there's no meaning. And it kind of goes against our intrinsic nature of being human. And I would venture to guess that if people believed or acted as if, and this is probably a big pieces of it, is how are you acting? Are you acting as if everything's determined, or are you acting as if you have free will? Because if you act as if everything's determined, well, then there's no reason for me to do anything. My outcome's determined. There's no road that leads to me being a bodybuilder or a fat slob. It's like I'm going to be one or the other. And so I think the nihilist route would have a tendency to put you in the groove that would take you towards that fat slob. Versus if it's like, hey, you have free will and you can choose either path, now it places a lot of responsibility on me. Not to mention, it's really fucking empowering to say, hey, you have choice over your life. You can decide what happens. And and to even expand upon that, I feel like science has gotten to a part with like neuroplasticity and, just I can't really rattle off the big words off the top of my head right now, but just where we've kind of gotten of like being able to change your reality from the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think it's pretty much been proven at this point that
Yeah.
there's free will.
Yeah, I think free will 100% exists, and for that exact reason. I mean, if anyone disagreed, that was like a perfect explanation. And yeah, I definitely see it as intentional living. And if we're not living with intention, then what the fuck are we doing? And I also feel like you what I was saying, okay, what came up for me when you were saying that was a place of radical responsibility is the most empowering place that you can go. And that is genuinely one of the greatest things that I learned along my spiritual journey is to step out of the effect of my life and like into the cause. Like everything is happening to me, to everything is happening for me, but also I do have radical choice and radical responsibility of the choices that I make, because we get faced with a million choices a day. Like if you actually think about it, like when you wake up in the morning, like you have so many choices. And with that, there's an
Arguably infinite.
infinite amount of
Yeah.
yeah, infinite, 100%. And that's why there's this infinite amount of realities, because we have this infinite amount of choices. And I fucking love that. Like, I love that about being human. Like, I love that we get to come down to, our little divine souls get to come down to these cute human bodies. And then we get to like play this game of choice every single day to like create the life that we want to create while also working towards our soul's betterment and our soul's evolution and our soul's purpose. So that's one of my favorite things that I've learned along my spiritual journey is the empowerment and the blessing of radical responsibility, because for so long, I feel like I didn't want to take responsibility for my life and my actions, and I feel like a lot of people feel that way. Like we just don't want to, because it almost feels easier in the moment. But in fact, it is so much more powerful to take that radical responsibility and know that each choice I make is an opportunity for something brilliant to come later down the line. And like that is just so special about being human.
And I think where it even gets more deeper. I don't even know if that's appropriate phrase.
More deep.
More deep or
Yeah.
deeper. Well, deeper is definitely a
Yeah.
word.
Deeper is definitely a word. I think it'd be more deep or deeper.
Or deeper. You can't be more deeper.
I don't know if you could be more deeper. You can be
The
deepest.
most deepest? What about the most deepest? Some English lecture grammar. Let me know in the comments below. What's the answer there? Uh, but even like a deeper route of this, and this is kind of where I'm getting to in my own little path or whatever you want to call it, is that it seems that we even, well, I know at this point, like we even have, and this might be triggering to some people, is that we have even choice over the emotions that we feel in every single moment of our life. And that's kind of the crazy thing. And I've noticed even within myself is creating that internal switch, like acknowledging my own triggers. And actually this was something I wanted to bring up to you at some point, because you played a role in my shadow work as well, that that was pretty funny. um Maybe I should just pivot off to that. Let me finish that thought first and we'll come back to it.
Okay.
It's just that having that internal like awareness of like, oh, okay, like this made me feel good, that made me feel bad, and you place those things on the external world, versus it's like you can just decide internally that both things make you feel good. You don't really have to say like, oh, this thing made me feel bad, that made me feel good, this made me feel better. And I get that there's a utility in discerning the outcome of you placing those things in there, but it's I don't know where I'm going with that. My mind's getting sidetracked now.
I mean, if it's getting sidetracked, I hear you saying that shit's neutral. Like, it's just the meaning that we place on it that makes it good or bad. Also, good and bad are just like the worst word. Like, they're just like words that, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? But if your mind's taking you somewhere else to what you were going to say before, like, let it go there.
You want to hear why you triggered me?
Yeah, I want to know.
uh, what was it? Well, it was a couple things. I think I noticed this actually with a couple other I think influencers, and this was something I think that came up. It was probably after our meet and greet, or maybe before it. It's been so long now, I don't even know. But it's interesting because whenever you kind of get into this content creation hole, I think um, you start to set these different like lines or these barriers of where you want to be, things you want to have, and what I started realizing as I was playing that game of being envious or jealous of other people who had, let's say, perceived in air quotes more than me. And I realized that you fell into that category as well whenever it came to the size of your podcast, you talking about your successful businesses. And to me, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this chick is like 4 or 5 years younger than me. Like, this is bullshit. The internal little triggering was kind of going off in my head, and I'm like, okay, let's calm down here. Like, what is this showing you? Kind of bring it inward. So I guess I kind of wanted to at least just bring it up to you that you were part of my trigger recently, and so I wanted to thank you unknowingly and say how grateful it is to sit down with one of my triggers.
I love that. I mean, we all do it, dude. Like, we all, I mean, like, I am super proud of what I've created. And yet, like, I still will look at somebody who has more than me and be like, but why am I not there yet? And
That's
that's
it.
what I
That's the
realized.
word. Yep, that's the
Yet.
phrase. That's the phrase.
It's always, it's always yet, because it truly is divine. It truly is divine timing. And like, I was just talking about this on my podcast the other day. Like, how do we get over that like jealousy and that like envy? Because we all deal with it. Like, I mean, and how do we deal with it from the other side as well? Like, and it's just streamlining that jealousy to inspiration, and that is like the ego to the soul mindset shift in that moment. If you can become to be inspired, but it's also okay to like acknowledge your ego and be like, well, because I have this one girl that I'm friends with, like internet friends with, and she has a podcast, and she had like one TikTok that just like blew up, and then her podcast like went to like number one on education podcast and is like still there. Like, first of all, just shows the power of like TikTok and like how powerful that is. One video can like literally change your life. And then, I started to like make videos like she was making videos. I was like, okay, well, like that can happen for me too. And like that's what I always try to tell myself. But still, I find myself like going and being like, oh shit, but like that hasn't happened. That one video hasn't blown up yet. And but why did it for her? Like, I'm creating the exact same content. Like, I think my content's even better. Like, like that ego comes in and it plays, and we all do it. And I think it's so important to talk about it and open up the conversation around like envy, jealousy, comparison, because like we all do it. Like, it's just like our ego's way of I don't even know what I was gonna say, what it's our ego's way of. I could really get into that, but
Well, it's
I
protection. I think it's a protection
yeah.
mechanism of it probably sitting there and being like, it depends on how you want to take it, right? And I think that's the important part, right? Is like I could sit here and be like, fuck Kayla, like this is bullshit, be angry at the world, if you will, versus saying, okay, what can I learn from this girl? What is she doing that I'm not doing? What is the secret juice in podcasting that would help my podcast, do better. Little things like that. I think that's what is like the opportunity that is presented before us, especially when it comes to triggers, that a lot of us tend to sidetrack and just kind of fall into the one hole or fall into that hole and either just cast judgment or shame on the other person. And I think one of the best sayings I've ever heard is like envy and jealousy is a poison that you drink and expect it to hurt the other person.
Yeah. Exactly. And the number one thing I will say that has helped me shift my mindset away from the comparison, especially because I have a lot of friends like in the social media industry who get a lot of eyes and a lot of like financial backing around what they're like creating. Um, I've realized that the universe, like my guides, like God, like is literally placing somebody in my life to show me that that is possible. That time,
Mm.
like that thing that they have is possible, and that's why it's in my field. It's not in my field to, you know, make me like the divine wouldn't do that. Like it's not in my field to make me jealous or make me compare. Like it's in my field to show me that it's possible for me too. And when I began to shift my mindset, I began to thank the people that had more than me, because there's this To Be Expanded is like, have you heard of them? They're like, they have a podcast. To Be Magnetic is their
Yeah.
podcast.
It's a girl,
TBM.
right?
Yeah,
I can
it's like
see
two
her.
girls.
Oh, it's two girls.
Yeah, but there's one
Oh,
main
wow.
girl, and it's like
Okay.
TBM, To Be Magnetic is like their company, and they talk about expanders and those people in your life that actually have more than you, that your ego might come up and try to, like, the mountain is you, hold you back, that self-sabotage. They're actually expanders in your life to show you, fuck, this is possible for me too. And the only reason that this is being put in my field, the only reason that I can see this is because I'm fucking next. Like my vibration is getting to a place where I can attract somebody like that into my life, where I can see that person, where I can be inspired by that person. And it's happening because it's going to happen for me too, in a
Mm.
different way, in a different timeline and divine timing, but it is going to happen for me too. And, obviously that doesn't completely make the comparison and the ego go away, but I like to reason with my ego. I like to chat with her. I like to be like, okay, but like maybe in the past, for example, like where can you see in your life that somebody's been placed in front of you and they've inspired you to get to where you are now, And I had a friend who I actually started the podcast with who um, was just like a big influencer. So also to calm your mind, I started a podcast with somebody who had like a lot of reach, and then she left and then I took it over. So like that's also why like I have like lots of eyes on my
Oh,
podcast
that
like
was the
right
that was
away.
the excuse I was looking for. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
My ego's
Yeah.
settled
Yeah.
now. My ego's nice and
Oh, okay.
settled.
Yeah.
All
No,
right, and that
it's
wraps it
true.
up
Like,
with Kayla.
you're like, okay, I got what I needed. But I think that she was in my life definitely for a reason, because I knew that I wanted to impact people, and I actually like really did things behind the scenes for her. And there was so many moments that would come up of like jealousy, like why does she have this? She doesn't care as much as I do, like and like that
Mm.
comparison and that ego coming up. And 3 years down the line, like she's actually not really in my life anymore, but I'm so grateful for her because she really showed me that it was possible. And I learned so many of the behind the scene things from watching her from a distance. And I got to decide, how do I want to do it, and how do I want to do it better, and how do I want to do it differently, and how do I want to do it in a more me way. And even though the comparison was coming up at first, now later down the line, as I've gained perspective and I can zoom out of that experience, I can see that like, oh, like, yeah, like she was put into my life as an expander to show me that this is possible.
Mm. And maybe we should talk about her a little bit because I did want to ask you about her, and we'll give her a name if you're comfortable with that, Tati. Because
Yeah.
I went back and listened to a couple of those early episodes, and they're pretty solid. I mean, you guys had great chemistry. So the question that I'm coming to is like, what happened? Are you comfortable talking about the fallout? Why is skinny dipping now just the Kayla Rose show? What happened there?
Um Also, their pronouns are she, they. I just want to like say that real quick. But I might use them interchangeably. So if I do that, that's why. But yeah, we were basically best friends since we were like 11. Like, just definitely twin flames. Like people would always tell us we looked alike. Like we both had this long brown hair and these like big green eyes, and we had a very similar way of being, but also very different ways of being. I feel like she was very like closed off to the world a lot more and really only like trusted me. And I feel like I'm a very like open, bubbly person, but yet our minds just like process things in a very similar way. We were always on the same page. We could finish each other's sentences. Like you said, we had amazing chemistry. Um, and when you work with someone and you live with them and they're your roommate and then you create together, but then I also was working for her as an assistant. There were so many cross lines and it really just created codependency. Like me and my boyfriend have been together for 7 years, but when me and Tachi were living together and creating together, I would be like spending way more time with her than my boyfriend. Like I would literally be like, Tachi's my partner, like literally my partner in
Mm,
life, like more so than my actual partner myself. Um, and it's crazy because nothing like super big really happened. It was like a skew of like a lot of small moments of like trust broken and really just the fact that we were very codependent. So like everything the other person did affected the other person so much that it was just like causing us both so much pain. And I think with the podcast, I always did everything for it. Like those episodes are amazing because she's brilliant and she is a great speaker. But also, I will just say I edited the shit out of that to make her sound great, and I edited everything. I got the guests. I did the socials. I created the ideas for what we're going to talk about. I created the outlines. Like I did everything, and like they would just show up. Um, and, I wasn't unhappy about that because it was bringing in eyes to what I was creating. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, I can say that what happened between us was just that we got in over our heads and got really too codependent. But from a personal perspective, I think I really gave away my power because I was doing everything and not getting much credit. And I was just kind of like this secondhand um just more so if you listen to the other old episodes, like I'm asking a lot of the questions and like letting her answer and like guiding her kind of through the conversation
mm.
and editing it to make it seem absolutely flawless. I would take like 8 hours to edit an episode with the two of us, and now like
Oh wow.
it takes an hour to edit an episode with a guest because it's just such a different experience. And I just really wanted to make sure that she sounded good and she liked it because I wanted her to promote it and I wanted people to see it. And I really displaced my power into somebody else, thinking that no one wanted to hear what I had to say. I didn't really think anyone was there for me. I just really thought that like it was great because I was creating something, but the reason that people were there was because of Tati. Um, and yeah, so I think it was a really big wake up call from the universe because it didn't really make sense to me at the time why we were having a breakup. Like both of us felt it, but there was no reason. Like we both began to have this resentment towards the other person, both of us. Like, I mean, we both made mistakes on both ends, breaking each other's trust. And I think that I didn't make sense at the time, but it really was just what was meant to happen. Like there was no way it wasn't going to happen. Like we had so many conversations trying to figure it out, trying to even like, you know, have me keep the podcast, but us keep our friendship. And like, she just didn't really want the podcast, so it didn't really matter like about the podcast. Like it wasn't really her thing. Like she wants to be an actor, which I like completely support them in. Like I think that's amazing. Um, but I think that the universe was just like, bitch, like you are displacing your power. And if you're not willing to see it yourself, like we're gonna force you into this deep change. And honestly, it's one of the biggest things that's impacted my spiritual journey. And I'm so grateful for the loss because it was such a deep grief because we had like an over 10-year friendship, like sisterhood, I've never had a relationship like this. So it was like a deep grief that like still can come up for sure. Like as you can hear my voice, like and it completely transformed my spiritual journey because I like got so sad and like so low and like so just like really questioned myself, like really just was like no one's going to want to listen to me. Like I want this so badly. Like I want to help other people. I want to have these conversations. Like I know this is my calling. Like I know that I love this. I know that this is like like words are like I believe that like everyone's words are medicine, but like for me and my purpose, I believe like I claim that my words are medicine to the world, and like I want to do it so badly. And I was faced with so much doubt and confusion and just complete intrusive, like no one, like this is not going to work out for you by yourself. And in fact, I was so wrong. So that is great to be out of it like a year and a half later, like a year and a half since like the breakup, and then almost like a year and 2 months since rebirthing the podcast. And that's why I called it like the rebirth, because it's a completely different podcast. Like I think we had great chemistry and we were very funny and we had very good conversations, but it's very, very different now, skinny dipping. Um, so that is kind of what happened. And it was really like one of the most painful things ever. I don't think I've lost friends, but I've never really had to like grieve someone who was alive. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, is like you just love somebody so much, but like you're not meant to be in each other's lives anymore. And it's just like, damn, that fucking hurts. Like it hurts, you know?
It sounds like you handled it at least in a very optimistic way, or it sounds like at least the most optimistic, at least that you probably could have in that situation. And yeah, I can certainly hear the pain in your voice. And it's a interesting way that you put it, with grieving somebody who's still alive, because it really does sound like, you know, it was another person who was very much in your life that you had to kind of let go of, so that you, and probably her as well, could, you know, fulfill your purposes as much as possible.
I really believe that. Yeah. I would love for, at some point down the line for us to reconnect. They were actually the first person on my show when I rebirthed the podcast. So at that point we were on like decent terms. But then it's like, I don't know. It's crazy how like when you're codependent with someone, like the littlest things hurt so badly. Like I unfollowed her on the skinny dipping Instagram and she like hated me. And I was like, wait, no, like that's not what that meant at all. Like I had certain, it wasn't malicious, and like little things when you're codependent with someone like hurt so badly. And if another person did that, it wouldn't fucking matter. But it's like when the small things happen, and then it's like comes to the point where it's like even my birthday, and like she didn't text me till like a week later. She's like, hope you had a good birth week. And I'm like, damn, we were like soulmates. Like we were like best friends for like 11 years. And like you didn't text me on my birthday? Like, I don't know. It's just like, it's crazy. And like it's actually like so crazy, Clayton, because like I like have gone through so many phases of like the healing from this, because it was just like at first went through me not feeling good enough, and like it was about the podcast and like the business, and then it really came down to, oh, how can I show 110% of myself to somebody and they can still not want to be in my life? Not saying I like it was mutual to an extent, but also it's like, why aren't you fighting for me? Like, why don't you want to have me in your life? Like I've
Sure.
done so much for you. Like I literally was like did everything, like emotionally like supported this person through like so much shit. And then it goes to like, oh, I fucking hate you. And like being hurt, and like the ego coming in and like judging and just being like, I'm better off without you, like fuck you. And like just so many different phases. And like 2 months ago I had like the greatest realization that I think I could have had. And it was just like, I just had no room to like be mad anymore or to like hate, or like, I literally just realized I was like, no, I fucking love this person. And like, we're not meant to be in each other's lives, but I still have such deep, unconditional love for them. And I just had this huge realization that like, life is too short, and I was like letting my ego like run the show and just be like trying to protect me. Like my ego constantly was trying to like hate them and judge them and criticize them, because it was trying to protect me from feeling the hurt. And then and even though I like really felt the hurt, like I really allowed myself to feel my feelings more than I ever had in my entire life. So that was a really big lesson, feeling to heal and letting myself like be in that pain and that grief, cuz like it was deep grief. I've lost my grandma, and that was like something I like grieve still, but like I nothing else. I really had to grieve that intensely and that deeply of a relationship. So that taught me a lot. But then 2 months ago, I had this huge realization that like life is too fucking short. And like the people that you're like mad at, like it doesn't fucking matter, because like they were like put into your life in this karmic way to like teach you such deep lessons. And like at a soul level, like the people that have like hurt you in your life, like even like if it really fucking hurt and they really fucking suck, like at a soul level, you love them because they've taught your soul such a deep lesson. And I just like had this realization. I was like, no, I it doesn't matter like what we go through. It doesn't matter like how far apart we go. Like there is an invisible string. Like, and I have like unconditional soul love for this person, no matter how much they've hurt me. And I think that was like the biggest lesson that I could learn. Like it was just a crazy lesson because I'd never realized that before. Like that unconditional love, you know?
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to take you to that. Didn't realize it was going to take you to that spot.
Yeah, no, it's just, yeah.
Just a piece of it.
Me neither.
Do you feel like the
But
door's still open in the future for any possible like reconnection?
yeah, like um I think I think I've been doing a lot more healing and they've done a lot more distracting. So I think that I've kind of come to this place where I do have this unconditional love. Um, and I think it's just a matter of time for their lessons to hit them. And I think once they do go through their lessons, I do see us being in each other's lives. I think everyone around us does. I like we have all the same friends, all the same connections. Like I think everyone like can see like the special connection that we created. And I definitely think in the future, like through more healing on both ends, but like specifically, like I feel like I'm just more of like I'm a head-on healer. Like I am like, okay, I see the wound, like let's go full in, like warrior Aries. I'm like, let's go full into the pain and feel it. And I'm not really afraid of that. On the other hand, this person is more so a triple air sign. So if that gives you any insight on the complexity of avoidance, it's a triple air sign moment. It's like avoid, avoid, avoid. Like I'm going to fly away, like and just disassociate. And where I am such a feeler, like I'm such a feeler. I feel into things. I go full in, and yeah, I think at some point, I think they're a little bit younger than me, like, and I think like a whole year younger than me, and I think I was just more willing to like feel it right away, and things come up where I like can tell that they're still hurt, but they like won't admit to it, like because I can see through their actions and what they're doing that they're very still hurt. So it's just like I think at some point they'll be willing to heal, and I could see us in the future being in each other's lives for sure. I definitely can, in a completely new way. But I think the lesson needed to happen, and also I needed to do the podcast on my own. I think I was really supplementing my vision for theirs and really um, minimizing what I thought would be best for the podcast and the ideas that I had because I didn't think they were cool enough or good enough for her. So I think that it really all happened divinely. Like the podcast is my baby. And the truth is, even though we birthed it together, it's always been mine. So yeah.
Yeah, I certainly am aware of how much effort goes into making a podcast, from ideas to editing to guests to uploading. It's a full-time job. This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by the official Traveling to Consciousness app, available on the iOS and Google Play Store. On this app, you're going to get exclusive content from articles to meditations to anything else that Clayton is going to put out. Here is also where you're going to find the only place to find the ad-free versions of the podcast. You're also going to be able to get the podcast at earlier dates than normal, the free release version of it. So the Traveling to Consciousness podcast app, I highly suggest that you download it because it's the only way that I suggest that you listen to it. And what's even better is that the company is always making updates. So please let me know if you personally have a recommendation and we can get that in there. So remember, download the Traveling to Consciousness app so that you can get early releases, you can get the video format, you can get it ad free, and so much more. So
It is. I don't think people realize that it's like so intense. And then on top of that, you have like creating content for it and marketing it and going on other shows to promote yourself and like so many other, and then also like making money from it, getting like sponsorships. Like there's so much that goes in to it. It's a complete full-time job, 100%. Like it takes up all my energy. And I was really not willing to admit that for a while. Like I was super like, I don't know, I was really holding on to my photography business, which I still do photography from time to time, but like I was just like had a death grip on my old life and like didn't want to let go of my old life. And then I had this whole realization, like another rebirth moment. I'm constantly dying and rebirthing. That is like that's just like my thing. I'm a Scorpio rising. Like we are the queens of death and rebirth. And I realized that I really wanted to commit. And that was maybe in the summer. So I like rebirthed it and I committed, but then I had to like recommit and come back in and be like, no, this is what I want. This is going to be my full-time income. We're going to fucking do this thing. And like now I'm finally getting to see like the fruits of that. And it's so amazing. But I also it's just the beginning. And as you know, like when you're doing something, you hit a milestone and then you're like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, right.
Like, let's go. Like this is just the beginning. The goals are much, much bigger.
I love it. Yeah, I hadn't listened to your podcast for a while, and just earlier this morning I reopened it, and I think it's like Frito Lay's might be like your mains. I don't know if you pick them yourself or how it works, but I like just kept getting blasted by Frito Lay's ads. And I was just like, what's going on here?
It's based off of like it's like dynamic, so it's like based off of like your certain like whatever it is, like age,
Demographic
gender,
and all that stuff.
demographic, things like that. That depends on what ad they give you, so you're not always going to get the same ad. But I do like I prefer my like 360 partnerships, which is like I read the ads and then I also like, you know, share on Instagram and TikTok, and like that's what I really want to do. I have like two teams that I work with. One of them does more 360 partnerships and the other one does more like the dynamic insertion ads, like the one that you're talking about. So I have no idea what's going on over there. I have no idea what's going on with the dynamic insertion. I haven't decided how I feel about it yet. It's very new. I'm going to like wait till like the paycheck comes in to see if I feel like it's worth it. But I mean, I do trust the team that I'm working with, and like I mean, like I was really weird about ads at first, but then it's just like, well, you gotta make money somehow, and people either need to pay for it exclusively or you get sponsorships and, you know, brands pay for it, and then your audience gets to, you know, enjoy you for free, which is like my preference for sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but I actually now have a community, like, so that's really exciting.
It's
Have you
beautiful.
heard of circle
I
communities?
have not.
It's so cool. So it's like a little it's like a website, but it's also an app. So it's like you kind of like create your own community and then you like customize your space, but it's like really just like you almost like your own app. I have my community and then I also have my podcast coaches that I work with, their community on there, but most people in my community are just on my community, so it's almost like they go on the app and it's just like our own personal app. Definitely the goal is to like create my own app and create my own space and community, but it's definitely a great way like right away to like get a space for your community to connect like in a more private place, which is really cool. So
Okay.
there's just like chat spaces, like we have like we're starting like a April abundance challenge that I created, and we have like a group chat for that, but then there's a bunch of like feed spaces like in Facebook. So there's like a social media discussion where I like post questions, and then there's like my resource page where like I post like breath work and EFT tapping videos. And then there's like another just like resources page where people can post like inspiration or videos or podcasts they love like that are impacting them. And then there's like another group chat, and then there's a space for like live Zoom calls and workshops, and like that's been a really cool new thing that I've been exploring in the past couple months. That's been like really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
you should check it out.
I do have an app. I was working with a company who kind of like hosts all my videos and audio, but I think there is lacking that community aspect because I think it needs like a forum of some sort where you're able to like post some like a Reddit style almost.
Yeah, and that's why I love Circle. I like think it's so cool because like I just find that it's the cleanest thing that I've used and researched, and it's also like the most, I don't know, it's easy to use. It's like looks really legit. Like it's not like forumy and like a very like made in the 2000s way, which I find like a lot of like do it your own apps are kind of.
Right.
The
Very
circle
old
community,
school.
it's like very clean and yeah, it doesn't look old school. It's like really cool. Like there's a couple bugs like that they need to fix, but honestly, for the most part, it's really great. And my podcast coaching team has it, and that's how I kind of got into it. Because I used it from a user perspective, and then I was like, this would be cool if I did this too.
Okay.
Also, just like amazing passive income, which I also love to talk about, that we can dive into any business things. Like I randomly just like love business and like the way that it like conjoins with spirituality and like energy work. Like it's so interesting. Like, and so that's been a really cool space for me to explore, like creating my own space and community that's not based on like the algorithm, which is really nice. Because like I don't know, obviously with like TikTok and everything potentially like going away, which I'm like don't even want to think about, but I mean, you just like can't depend on these apps to do shit for you, because TikTok is like the one thing that isn't completely altered by like the 1%. I think I saw a TikTok this morning and it was like, this is why TikTok's been getting banned. And it's like, look at France in your Instagram and you see all these pictures of the Eiffel Tower and girls having their crepes and like all this stuff. And then you look it up on TikTok and you see like the bombings, the riots, like fucked up shit that's going on. And like that's all
Ah.
censored on Instagram. That's all censored on Facebook. Like Zuckerberg like wants to like rule this whole fucking world. So I just like to have a space of my own that we can like talk about what we want to talk about, and it's not like censored, and the algorithm's not going to shadow ban me because I like bring up a certain topic. Like literally I know this one girl that I've started to follow, and she talks a lot about just like the intergalactic like meetings and like
The Galactic
aliens and
Federation of Light.
Galactic
Yeah.
Federation, yes, all that good stuff, and she just, like, gets banned on YouTube left and right. Her videos are
It's
they
crazy.
no like, it's so censored, like, when you actually get into the real shit, like so that's why having your own space is, like, really cool and important. I don't know why I'm getting off on a tangent. Bring us back,
No, that's all right. We
Clayton.
can ride down it. I feel it's a part of the conversation because no, I'm all on board there because it's interesting. I posted a reel on my Instagram and it actually blew up. It got like 1 million views, and I
Yeah.
have 100 some ish thousand on Instagram. And I looked at the reels numbers, and it was only like 50,000 of those followers actually saw the reel. And I found that so fascinating because it's like even the content I'm putting out, even if it goes viral, half my followers aren't even seeing it in the first place. So it certainly need that some level of like direct communication with people. And honestly, I think this is why like email lists or newsletters have always been so big, is because you can send something directly to the people who want to talk to you or want to communicate with you. And I think you're stumbling on a very important point, which is just that you can't rely on the algorithms in order to get to those people that you want to talk to or
Mhm.
who want to see you.
Yeah, no, totally. And, like, also, it's so interesting because I love that Instagram, is, like, pushing things more, like, than they were before. Like, I still need to kinda, like, hop on the Instagram train, especially with everything happening on TikTok, but it's, like, even, like, TikTok being banned, like this is just like a random thought, but it's going to change like the whole Instagram algorithm and who sees your stuff there, because now they don't have to compete with TikTok. And if they don't have to compete with TikTok, then like they don't really want to push your shit as much. Like I don't know, not your
Well,
shit, just people's shit. Your
sure.
shit's great. You know
Oh, thank
what
you.
I mean? Like just like everyone, like yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just not for the
I
censorship.
think,
Fuck.
first of all, we can definitely start there. Censorship, bad. 100% there.
Censorship bad. No
Censorship
good.
is bad. Yes. Reject censorship. I think there's also probably a lot more to this TikTok thing as well. I think there's probably something to say with China, but with that being said, I think China probably has access to all of our data anyhow. I don't think that we should be naive to think that they don't already have it. I also think that there's probably something with, I think we got to look at it in the terms of attention, right? Because the reason that TikTok or the value of any social media company that's free to use is because they have your attention, they have your data, they have your information, right? So with TikTok, I think the way that their algorithm works, the way that they have figured out to shorten our attention span, which obviously isn't good for, but they have captured the attention of so many people. And what happens is because they have so much attention, who loses out? Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all the people who have monetary influence in government, the people who are paying for it, the people who are, lobbying. And honestly, I'll be interested to see if this video now gets rejected from YouTube because we're having this conversation. But um, we'll cross that
Well,
bridge. We'll cross that bridge.
we'll cross the bridge when
Yeah.
we get there. And we can also move on. Like, honestly, like, what's gonna happen happens. It's
Well,
like
the last piece, I'll put the last piece out there that I think is important is with the if they push through this bill to ban TikTok, I think there's a big issue here, which is that in the naming of the or the naming in the language of the bill, it basically says that they can. And I should probably look this up. This comes back to me verifying, but it basically says that they can ban any apps that they deem fit, which is a huge issue.
yeah.
And of course, they'll pass it under the guise of China or Russia, or, So I think that's also a big thing that needs to be
Yeah.
paid attention to.
Yeah, and it's also like the amount of people, like that's like it says on the bill, like it's more than a certain amount of users, like they can ban that.
Really?
Which just shows that like I don't know, collective information traveling is so powerful and that's so fucking scary for them. So I think that's what it boils down to is like their fear.
Let me verify this just so because
Yeah.
I had one video taken down by YouTube and I wasn't exactly specific with my language and it was something they could jump on, so they got mad at me. But uh, this episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Mushy Love. Mushy Love is a latte type blendable mushroom caffeine free elixir that honestly tastes like a liquid cinnamon roll. And I know that you're going to find that on their website, but it's honestly true. It's stacked with more than twice the amount of mushrooms as any other mushroom latte. And I know that there's one in particular that we all think about, which kind of starts with the word mud, but this one blows that one out of the water. I highly, highly recommend if you even try that one to just give this one a shot. And I promise you that you will not be sorry, because I just, it's so good. It's honestly so good. And I want to get to a place where I can actually they send me these all the time for free. So please go and buy it, because if you buy more, then they'll start sending me more. And it's just honestly a win-win, because it tastes amazing, like even in water. So even if you're cutting, even if you don't want to like put milk in or coffee with it, you can just do it plain in water. And it's so freaking good. Guys, go click the sponsors link below, scroll down to Mushy Love, buy your pack today. Remember promo code Clayton, I can't even talk right now. Promo code Clayton at checkout for 10% off your purchase. Mushy Love. Mushrooms shouldn't have to taste like mud. Give yourself some Mushy Love. Let me cut. Yeah. National security. Yeah, ban explained. Can they ban other apps? Boom, boom, boom. I'm not finding anything on the topic.
I wonder why.
I wonder why.
I'm cleansing our space because
Oh, nice. I got some sage right here too.
yeah, sage.
Yeah.
This is like certain like it's not like traditional sage. It's like I need to ask my friend who gave it to me what the name is, but it's like a different plant medicine that looks just like sage, but it actually works more so with like the crown and
Oh,
third
really?
eye chakra. So it's really good for like opening up. Yeah, it's different. Like she had like all these like 5 different like types. Like have you seen like the red sage too? Like that one's really cool. That
No.
one's more grounding.
Really?
Really cool. And you could feel like she was like, okay, like she was like, we're gonna try out all these things. And she would like do the smoke on me, and then she would be like, okay, what do you feel? and it actually worked. Like I could feel like where sage is more like smudging and clearing energy, and then like the red one was more grounding, and then this one was more like opening and expanding.
Whoa.
Super interesting. But I'm clearing out the space because I'm like, I want to move on, Clayton. I don't know why I want to move on
All
from the
right, you're not
subject.
crazy about this conversation.
I don't know. I just don't want to think about it right now
Okay.
because it's just
Well,
scary.
I mean, I guess this kind of comes back to empowerment, right? It's finding that power
Yeah.
within yourself. And, well, if you want to move on, we can move on. We don't have to harbor it. I do enjoy though getting away from like pure spiritual talk, because I feel like with like a 3 hour podcast, sometimes it can get like super heavy if we're like, oh, well, you got to be empowered, you got to be grounded, you got to, shadow
Well,
work.
totally. Well, what I love personally, like, and I don't know if you've heard this on my podcast, is I like love talking about like actionable things. Like that is like one of the main things around my platform that I really try to implement is like, okay, we're talking about things in theory, like we're talking about, these big ideas, these big concepts, and also like our personal experience, but like how does this transfer to action? How does this transform into something that is applicable to like the real world and real people's lives?
Oh, for sure. So then
Yeah.
what would be, based on our conversation earlier, what would be one thing or one action that's kind of coming to you that the audience could start implementing today?
Mm. We talked about a lot of
We
things,
did,
I
didn't
guess.
we?
Yeah, we did. I mean, yeah, which one in particular do you think like?
The idea of shadow work's coming up, which we
Mhm.
may not have talked too much about your side of it, but shadow work's coming up right now.
Oh yeah, we talked about the ego, and we talked
We did
about
talk about
her,
the
the,
ego.
the Miss Little Ego, and what she's doing. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, when it comes to shadow work, I think a big part of that is diving into the ego. A big part of that is simply getting curious with yourself and asking yourself questions. And I guess like a format that I do and a lot of people do is like journaling, but like asking yourself question answer, like Socrates method, like literally like asking yourself the question and like answering and like just writing from your subconscious without thinking, like whatever words are coming to you, even if they don't make sense, just like pour them on the page and then allow your intuition to come up and see, oh, what question needs to come through next. And that's really a big way that I like dive into the ego is like I will have my journals a lot of just like questions and answers, like me just being like, well, why do you feel this way and what did this stem from, and what is this triggering within you? Like, what part of yourself is this triggering? I really love doing like parts work. And like, that's something that my therapist does with me a lot is almost personifying the different pieces and parts of yourself and trying to figure out what they need, but also what do they have for you? Like when she's doing parts work with me and she, puts me on the table and we begin to do some somatic healing. I think that's also an actionable thing that I would recommend is finding somebody who can help you with somatic healing and like body work in some way, because I think that is a really powerful way to tap into your subconscious. Mostly because when you're so relaxed, you can you can go into theta, which is going to allow you to tap into those deeper parts of yourself and like memories that you might not even remember or past lives or things like that. But when we're doing the parts work and she has me almost like imagine this person, for example, like yesterday, we were doing this parts work around the version of myself or the part of myself last week who was really sad, really depressed. I had no chemicals in my body. Like I was depleted. Like I had done a little bit of drugas, I'm not going to lie. And I felt so depleted afterwards. Plus, I got sick. Plus, I got hit with a post like vacation, like low. Plus, I got my period. And I was just like, literally had no happy hormones in my body. And I literally felt like I don't get depressed super often. I'm really careful about using that word because I think that's like a very heavy, intense, emotion or lack of emotion. But I think that I really felt that last week. So we took out this part of myself and like, what does she look like? Like how old or what do they look like? What is their gender? Like what age are they? What are they wearing? And allowing myself to see that version of myself and then have that question and answer with that part of myself, like
Mm.
while I'm on the table, dropped in, closed eyes. And I really found out that that part of myself, little girl, she looked like a little orphan to me, was just really lonely and like felt really alone in the world and like in her experience. And at the end, she's like, okay, like we do some things around visualization and light work to kind of bring her light, like bring her protection and bring her energy, that part of myself, before we integrate her back in. But then she asks, well, she has a gift for you. Like, she has a gift for you. Will you ask her what gift she has for you? Like, she's meant to have a gift for you. And then, of course, whatever like first pops up, that subconscious moment, and she gave me like a pocket watch, and I was like, okay. So we're like
That's
kind of like analyzing like, what does this pocket watch mean, and what is she giving to you? And it's really special because when you ask yourself these questions, like, you'll notice that your inner being will answer. Like, if you tap in and you ask these questions and you get curious with yourself, either through working with a therapist or just journaling that question and answer like format, you realize that the person will give you the answer of like what you need. And then also in turn, so she was like, oh, so she gave me a pocket watch. And so I kind of realized that was her like really giving me time, like time to process, time to pause. And then she was like, okay, and you have a gift for her. And I was like, I have a gift for her. I was like, I didn't bring anything. No, no, but she was like, yes, you have a gift for her. Like, give her a gift. And like what came to my mind was a birthday cake. And I was like, a birthday cake. And I just realized it's like that celebration of that part of yourself, like still celebrating yourself even when you're low, like still giving yourself that attention that you need. And also, she was like, okay, what sign is she? And both me and my therapist, who's like such a psychic bitch, was like, we were both like, she's a fucking Leo. We were just like, she needs all that attention and all that time. And I think that's like an actionable thing that really anybody can do. Like, I think it's powerful to do it with a therapist, but also you can drop into meditation and do parts work and like remove certain parts of yourself and imagine them as a character and imagine them as a separate part of yourself and ask them the questions that you're needing to hear from that part of yourself within you, because like that 8-10 year old part of myself lives within me, and she feels lonely sometimes, and sometimes she just needs a little extra attention. And I think that's like a really cool actionable thing that people can do, like even just by themselves or like in their journal, just asking their inner being those questions and setting that intention to be like, okay, like I'm going to be setting this intention to connect with my inner being, to ask these questions. Like, I'm curious. And when we come from a place of curiosity, that's when things can transform.
Hmm.
So that's a random actionable thing that I did yesterday with my therapist.
Not random at all then. Yeah, I've done that with a hypnotherapist actually before, where he kind of, what did he have me do? He had me sit in a room, and I like described the room, and it was kind of like a board, like a conference room. And he was like, okay, now it's gonna walk in, I don't know, your personification of like unworthiness or something like that, and like in walked, like, I think like a 14-year-old me or something. But the whole crux of it though is like exactly what you're saying, which is like this very interesting dynamic of how we can personify emotion. Like we can actually create like a human being out of a certain emotion that we're going through or we're experiencing. And I don't know if it happened with you, but in my situation, right? Like I met this kid or this person, this version of me, this part of me. And then I kind of like, did all that exploring that you were talking about. And then at the end of it, he brought me back to the boardroom to look at the kid, and the kid kind of changed a little. Like he kind of matured a little, like he was
Mhm.
kind of sitting upright more. Like he was more like embodying himself.
Totally. That happened to me too. She went from like ratted, tatted clothing to kind of like her hair kind of got like brushed, and like she just had like a cuter dress on, and like she just looked more confident and more like color in her skin, and like, so that did happen to me too. That's
That's
cool.
pretty
I love
wild.
that. Yeah. Um I need to plug in my computer because I had
Oh,
100% when we started.
not a hunch.
Now I have 10. But maybe you could, I know we're live, so I don't know if you wanna take it,
No, go ahead.
maybe you could take a plug something you have going on, but I have to find it real
Yeah,
quick. So if you wanna
sure.
continue the conversation on your own for a minute, I'll be right
All
back.
right. let her do her thing. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. So, right now, we're just going to plug drinking water. So, make sure you get some water and drink with me. This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Conscious Technologies LLC. Talk about an aligned company name. This company creating technology that will revolutionize the way that humanity is able to resonate or vibrate with the electromagnetic frequency of your phone, of your Wi-Fi router, of the light bulbs in your house, of really anything. What they do is they have created these amazing minerals, amazing units that you can either place on the back of your phone, you can wear it as a necklace, or they even have like little in-house generators, if you will, that can unify the entire field of an entire house. I've experienced these things in person, and I unequivocally can tell you that it does something, and it helps you feel more present, more calm, and more connected to the spiritual dimension, if you will. And I highly recommend that you also check out episode number 034, where I actually talked to one of the co-founders, and it blew my mind away. One of my favorite episodes, where we actually get into how he creates it, why it's created. And, you know, if this wasn't enough of a sell for you, go check out that episode, because I know that it will sell you after that. Conscious Technologies LLC, harmonizing the planet one person at a time. I don't know why that came to mind. Also, guys, I've been dying from a headache today, so I apologize if I'm a little off my game. Honestly, you probably haven't even noticed it all, but now you're going to notice it throughout the rest of this podcast. But here we are. But anyhow, drink water. I am also wearing my Traveling to Consciousness shirt, so hopefully people can get that and check it out. What should we ask her? What should we talk to Kela about? The energetics.
Okay, cool.
We all plugged in?
We're all plugged in. Hopefully it works nice and good and charges
We
me.
can't get naked of the charger. We got to keep that in.
Okay, cool.
There you go.
Okay.
We were talking about water.
Do that.
We were talking about the importance of hydrating.
Love that. I need to hydrate.
You missed it. I was plugging it. You gotta. I was thinking about you, I guess. There was, I guess, energetics. You were talking about at one point the energetics of business. You were talking about how you were seeing the spiritual component of a business or of podcasting. So, like, I mean, what does that even mean, right? These are
Yeah.
physical things, but you're describing them in terms of energy. What are you even talking about there?
Yeah, so what I've realized along my journey, and this didn't start necessarily with social media and podcasting. This started with photography, which was my first business that I started when I was 18. And I did weddings and engagements here on Maui, also like brands. And I began to just see the association of, first of all, just how much energy was I putting towards the business, and two, how many inquiries I was receiving. So that's kind of where this exploration like first began, was at this very like simple level of, if I wasn't paying attention to my business, I wouldn't be getting inquiries. But as soon as I started like sending out some emails, editing some photos, putting energy just towards the business in any type of way, not even in an advertising way, not even in a social media way, not even doing anything that people would technically see more of me, I would begin to receive inquiries again. And I realized that I always kind of had this power to come in and get more work and get more business and make more money if I decided to put the energy towards that. It didn't matter if what I was doing was actually transforming into, you know, an actual client. It wasn't necessarily that, but it was actually the energy from my mind that I was putting in towards something that would then in turn be given back to me from the universe. And that's kind of where it first began, where I began to see this connection between just business and energy and how I could choose. And for example, like with the podcast, like not really putting any energy into it, not seeing any growth, not seeing any traction. And then all of a sudden, like I put my energy into it, not just time wise, but money wise. I invested a shit ton of money into a coach. And a big reason for that was I was like, I'm fucking serious about this. And I'm ready to show the universe that I'm willing to put it all on the line. And the coaches were great. I loved them. Like, I'm grateful that I made that investment, but mostly because I began to take it seriously. And in turn, the universe rewarded me with even like viral videos that would bring traction to my podcast.
Mm.
Then it goes into me exploring social media and how that connected to my energy. So when I would post videos, I would realize if I was like having a bad day or I was just scrolling on social media and in that really low vibe, my videos would get literally like 100 views, like nothing. Like that's nothing on TikTok. And then if I had a day, if I posted a video and completely forgot about it, I completely forgot I posted the video and I'm surfing, I'm enjoying my life, I'm seeing my friends, I'm in play, I'm in that high vibration, boom, the video would blow up. Also, every single time that I've done Molly, my video has gone so viral, which is not something I do often. It's like a four time thing in the last like 2 years. Like I'll post a video right before and then ignore my phone for the night. And it's like, I mean, not saying like, but you go to such a high place and such a high vibration that my videos literally went to millions of views. So I began to see this correlation between my energy place and how I was feeling and how many views my videos were getting, even though they have zero correlation except energy and how I was feeling in my body. So that's kind of how I began to like explore this. And then I kind of began to work with my therapist after a couple of years of us really like diving into more like myself. After we kind of just like, I don't know, cleaned things up and cleared the pathway for myself, we started working on business and we started to begin working on money values. And she's really well trained on working around your money values. So we would sit down and she would be like, okay, like, why do you want money? Like, what's your goal and why do you want that? And I would have to write down like 15 reasons why I wanted all that money. And then we'd sit down, and this was the first time I did it. So I had no idea like what the fuck was going on and what the plan was. I was just like writing down whatever came to my mind. Coming up with 15 reasons why I want to make money felt kind of difficult at the moment. So I was really just thinking about that. Because in my head, I was like, obviously I want money. Like I just like,
Who doesn't?
I want a nice house, a nice
Right.
car. Like who doesn't want money? But I need to think of specific reasons. And we went through each of the reasons and she would say, okay, is this a move towards or is this a move away from? Are you moving towards something? Are you moving towards joy? Are you moving towards service? For example, like one of the things is I really want to pay off my parents' mortgage. That's moving towards something, an act of service. Or is it, for example, like a lot of mine were like, I I want to travel, which like, but she was like, can you not travel if you don't have that money? Like, really? Like, is that the full truth? Like, can you not do it? And then that would be a move away from because I was trying to avoid pain. Are you moving towards joy? Are you moving towards that high vibration of love? Or are you moving away from the pain? So we went down and we sat through all of these reasons, and only like 2 of them out of these 15, I was moving towards joy, towards love, towards something. All the others I was moving away from. And that's the mindset shift that we need to make in money is when we're moving away from pain, we're coming from this place of lack. And as we know from just knowing about lack consciousness versus like abundance consciousness, like if we want to attract what we want, like we need to be in that abundant mindset. But what is that abundant mindset? I feel like no one really talks about it. And it's moving towards the joy. It's moving towards what feels good, and it's moving towards service because service is one of the most highest vibrations. It's moving towards gratitude. It's moving towards, but constantly we're trying to move away from something. We want to make the money so that we can, you know, make our rent, and that's coming from this place of fear. And immediately afterwards we did this, and then a week later, this was more so when I was doing photography, I booked a full day like $4,000 gig. And this was like 2 weeks after we had done this money value, and I had never booked like a full day before. Like that was something that was on my price, like on my rate sheet, but no one had ever booked it. So literally 2 weeks after clearing out the way of these money values and reprogramming it and going through, and I had to write everything in a move towards, like a towards format, and kind of rewire why I wanted the money and the subconscious reasons for why I wanted it. And then I booked something fucking huge. And then I realized that was directly correlated, because obviously it is. Like, that's not just like, that's not a fucking coincidence. First of all, I don't believe in coincidences. So that was not a coincidence. And then I began to see, like, that was one of the times where I was like, oh my God, like, I did this work, like this internal work that's only happening within me, but it's showing up in a physical manifestation. And almost got like addicted to it. Like, I would go to therapy and I'd be like, okay, let's work through this next thing. I want to make my bag. Almost to the point where I was like intellectualizing it too much, which we could get into in a separate conversation, is like intellectualizing your healing and feeling and doing it for the wrong reasons, which I've definitely experienced, because I realized I was so fucking powerful. And every time I cleared out a blockage, either, I would do clearing around past lives and being seen, and what is keeping my videos from going viral. Like, I'd literally work on this in therapy, like, which sounds silly, but like, as somebody in my, like, in like the world that we're living in today, that's a big part of business, and like has the ability to transform your business, like we were talking about earlier. One video can change everything. So clearing out those blockages, and then like a couple weeks later, like hitting like the 100K mark on TikTok or something like that. Like, I began to see that when I cleared out the emotional blockages, it made a clear path for me to manifest things in the physical form. And that's when I really became interested in spirituality, or just more so like energetics and business and money and abundance, because it's literally all connected. And those are all like, not all the examples, but those are just like the ones that come to my head where I was just like, you can't make this shit up. Like, it works. Like, if you clear out the blockages between you and what you want, which are usually your limiting beliefs, your default programming that you were taught, or just like fears that you've carried from past lives or this life, when you begin to clear those out and begin to heal through them, you open up for so much abundance to come to you in your business, not just in your personal life, you know?
Oh, for sure. And let's stick on that money and connection to like the moving towards thing, because I know that's probably a very actionable thing, like we were saying
Mhm.
earlier. And it's probably something I'm like getting this poke that I need to do it as well, because I know that, oh, when was it? Oh, because my birthday just passed as well. And
Happy
thank you.
birthday.
When was your birthday again?
The
The
22nd.
22nd. Yes. So happy past
When's
birthday. I'm
yours?
the 28th.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. Aries King.
Aries. Yeah, because you were just in the Aries. Okay, I remember that conversation now. Yeah. Um, and my parents asked me what I wanted. And my gut reaction, which has always been for Christmas or for my birthday, has always been money. And whenever they asked me for my birthday, that's when I really started to sit with this. I was like, why am I always asking for money? It's like, because I've gotten to this point logically where it's like, money's just an energy. It's not that important. Like, wouldn't you rather ask for, I don't know, something cool that you can kind of remember, some cool trinket, right? That you're like, oh, they gave me this on my, X birthday. And it really resonated with me. It's like, holy shit. Like, the reason that, like, with money, I associate safety. I was like, the reason that I want money is to feel safe. It's like, there's nothing else that money is really like, kind of that like extra level, right? Like you were kind of explaining, there's that extra level to the reason that you're bringing in this money. With me, it was like, just make me feel safe. Like, if I feel safe, money's going to come in, I'll feel safe. But that's such like a baseline almost level of money. That's not going to take you to this next level, if you will. So where I'm curious, right? And what you're kind of talking about here with the way that you kind of dove in, you wrote out these 15 things, because I know if I wrote out those 15 things, traveling would certainly be on that list, right? But that's not really a thing that you can do, right? If you want to travel, you can go walk down the street if you want. All right, you can do that for free. Yeah, it's easy.
You could drive.
Drive, yeah.
I mean, I can't drive. I live in the middle of the ocean, but other people can drive across the mainland.
Right. You could take a raft. You could build a raft. I'm sure you have all the, yeah.
Perfect.
I think everyone in Hawaii has to learn how to build rafts or something, right?
I don't know how to
I'm
build.
just kidding.
Oh my
I'm making up a Hawaiian stereotype. It's gonna start here. Um,
God.
but yeah, so I think that's really fascinating, right? Where I was like, holy shit, money, safety. So how do you how did you, at least, or what would be like the process, I guess, that you'd recommend for people to make that shift into like shifting money as being this thing that can actually create alleviate suffering for other people, or that you can utilize it to be a positive impact on the world?
Yeah, I guess it's about taking what you want to do later and doing it now. Like I realized like I was like, "Oh, well, I'll do this when I have the money. I'll donate to these people when I have the money. I'll donate my time even to these people when I have the money. I'll go, on that trip when I have the money."
Mm.
And when we take that and we almost just say fuck it and we do it now and go against that ego, cuz like when we can reason with our ego, like I said before, like I definitely like chat with my ego, but I think there is this level of like subconscious reprogramming, which can be done. I think it's really helpful to have a practitioner. Like, I think when you are guided through something, even in like hypnosis, like my therapist works with like hypnotherapy and will like do certain things to step into new realities almost through our mind, through our imagination. I think it's really helpful to have a practitioner to guide you through that. But in terms of what you can do just like on the daily, like I've really found this deep love for EFT tapping. And have you explored that at all?
I think I had one session where they had, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe it was something else. They like had me cultivate like a joyous moment in my life, and then they like tapped on the microphone, and then they had me associate it with a vision that I want to experience, and then I think they tapped again. Is that the
Mm.
same thing?
No, that's
No.
not it. But that's cool. That's interesting. No, basically EFT tapping is based off of the meridian points. So we have all these meridian points in our body and it really goes
And they're
like
pointing to like
they've been
your
doing this.
chin, your forehead.
Yeah, like you can feel like if you feel right there, you can feel a meridian point. Like right there is a meridian, right here. Like they almost feel like little divots. Like right there's
So like
one,
in the nose,
right
where the nose eye meets the
here.
nose.
Yeah, you can feel at the top of your head. There's like the little divot almost. It's like almost feels like a pressure point
Okay.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
I feel it.
or like right here. Right here's a really big one. If you like kind of
On
squeeze,
the
that's like kind of
inside.
a pressure point
You
right
gotta
there
give
on your.
we got
It's
listeners.
called
We
your.
got mostly
Oh yeah,
listeners. You gotta
sorry.
get the description where you're
Listeners,
grabbing.
my
It's
bad.
all
So we have like the karate chop
right.
point. So like on the hand side of your pinky, that like edge right there, that is a really big tapping point that people call the karate chop point. Like if you were to karate chop something
Okay.
right there, that's the point. And then yeah, on the inside of your eye, like right underneath your nose, like right above your lips, you can feel the divot. And then if you go on your collarbone and then you go closer towards your neck and you kind of just feel along your collarbone and you'll feel the divot kind of right in
Mm.
there. It's more closer towards your neck, like closer inwards towards your heart center.
In the center.
Like right. It's like on your collarbone either side.
Okay.
So like maybe pick your right side and then just a little off from center on the collarbone.
Oh, it feels like
You're
there's like a
almost there.
tendon that's kind of
Yeah.
like right
It's
here.
like a little divot. Yeah.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Buzzsprout. And now this ad is for any of my fellow podcasters out there. Or even if you're starting to think about a podcast or creating one, a key that you need to know is that you got to put your audio somewhere. Then you need someone or something to distribute that audio. And Buzzsprout is by far the best option that I have found to get your audio put out on all of the mainstream directories like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play Store, all of them. iHeartRadio, you name it. I have been able to be featured on over 18 different podcast platforms because of how easy Buzzsprout makes it to integrate and host your audio on these sites. And honestly, I think I'm hosted on even more than that, but that's all that they'll tell me is it's over 18. And they have great software to track where your episodes are being downloaded, how many downloads you're getting, and so much more. Guys, I highly recommend it for anyone who is starting or interested in starting a podcast. So please go check the sponsors, a link down in the bottom of the show notes. Scroll down once you get there, go to Buzzsprout, click on the link, and I want you to start your podcast because we need more. It's amazing. Buzzsprout, podcast hosting made easy.
So we have all these meridian points in our body, which goes back to like Chinese medicine, and like they're the ones that have discovered this. But basically, like they've really found, and like, you know, we could go into like the actual research, but when you tap on these points, like you take like, for example, the karate chop point, and you're just like tapping on it, like right there, like where you would karate chop. Basically, they've really found that this is a way to move energy throughout your body and reprogram your mind subconsciously, like, and somatically.
Whoa.
So it's super interesting because the results people are getting, like, I mean, there is, like, a whole science behind it that, like, I'm not like, I do know about, but, like, I have it all in my notes, so, like, it's not at the top of my head right now, of
Sure.
course, but it has to do with the meridian points and, ancient Chinese medicine, and basically how when we move these points in our body and we tap on them, it moves the energy through, and it allows us to either release certain emotions or reprogram certain emotions within our body through, like, this somatic tapping. And so what you'll do is you'll like tap on all the different meridian points, and you'll say almost like affirmations. Like you'll be like tap, 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 tap. And then you'll be like, I choose to release all the subconscious blocks around money. And I choose now in this moment that I am an abundant magnet for money. And it's like doing affirmations with this tapping. The results are crazy. Like I've like read so many success stories, and it's a thing that actually like a lot of people are starting to use, like, but it's like older. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's been around for a long time, but it's like coming back like as things always
All
do.
right.
And I'm sure people have done it forever. But that's been a really cool way to reprogram your mind. And if you do like a whole like 3-minute tapping session, like you can feel your vibration change. And I've been tapping a lot with money, and I really find that it helps reprogram my mind and makes me less fearful around money. I just like go to YouTube and I go like EFT tapping for like financial abundance. And there's this one guy that does it. Like there's this one guy that's like really known for it. His videos will come up right away.
Okay.
He's just like this older guy. Um, and his videos are great. And you just like go and you follow along and you do them. And it's actually so powerful that the results that are coming in for people. And I know a friend of mine who this is like her main thing that she does. And she did it for like 2 years, and she did like so many sessions, and she like literally had no money in her bank account. And then like a year later, like is making bank, and like her podcast is going off and her social media is going off, and like she literally attributes it all to just tapping every single day and like reprogramming her mind for this abundant mindset. So that's something that everyone I think should look into, and if it calls them, amazing. um if not, I just think in general, like finding ways to either listen to yourself in the morning, like do a recording of yourself and say all the affirmations around like financial abundance, and like listen to yourself every morning saying that. That can also be really powerful, because when we rehearse, obviously, like as you know, like when we rehearse abundance, like it creates abundance, because our mind's main goal is to create familiarity, because familiarity equals safety. So the only reason to go from the only like way that we can go from point A to point B is by rehearsing it either in our mind or repeating it so much that our brain begins to believe it, because our brain will always choose what is familiar to it over what is like better for it, because our ego prioritizes familiarity, because familiarity equals safety, as you were talking about before. So when we can like mentally rehearse and like reprogram with these like phrases that like we really do believe that we are abundant and we really do believe that we are a money magnet, like it actually works. I don't know what else to say, but it actually works. Like and it's just one of those things that you have to try for yourself to see the effects, but I feel like I can feel the effects right away. Like I can feel the clear outs from the EFT tapping right away. Or if I listen to Abraham Hicks in the morning, like that's something that immediately boosts my vibration. And that's something that I do. Like this morning, I did it. Just like listening to something that is very positive and reaffirming and reprogramming
Mm.
for my mind, because the more that I hear it, the more that I believe it, and the more that it's familiar, the more that my mind will accept it, and the more likely I will be to create that new reality for myself through that act of familiarity.
Oh.
But the EFT tapping is really cool. I wish I had like all the science for you, but I don't. But I think everyone should look into it because it's actually crazy the results people are seeing.
It's
Like,
you opened up the
it
door.
blows my mind.
You opened up the door, so maybe that's what you're supposed to be here to do. One of the things that you're here to do.
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look into
That's like
this.
the thing. Like, I don't necessarily want to be like an expert. Like, I just want to be a bridge. Like,
Mhm.
I know some people really have come into this world to be certain experts in their craft. And I just don't necessarily like feel that for me. Like I don't have this pull or this calling to be an expert in anything. Like I really just want to be a bridge to be able to communicate complicated concepts and make it simple that people are interested and so that they can explore it themselves because that is truly the greatest like teacher is experience, you know? Like that's like the most cliche thing to say, but it's true. That's why it's cliche. Like, and I really just want to be a bridge. I just want to be like, this worked for me. Like, and you can only know if it's gonna work for you if you try.
I can certainly relate to that.
Yeah.
I've seen and done too many things at this point where it's like I can't sit there and just dive into one aspect of life, even if it's just health or fitness or mentality or what is it? I mean, I guess spirituality kind of, but it's such a broad topic to me that
There's so
there's
much.
so
Yeah,
much.
it's so all of those topics were so broad. Like, and I really appreciate people who can be an expert. Like, I love the experts in my life. Like, I love the people that I can turn to and be like, this is their craft. This
For
is what
sure.
they've done. And I admire it so deeply. And I'm just like, I don't think that's for me. Like, I just love too much. Like, same like you. I just love being a multifaceted human being who likes a bunch of things. And I love to dive into different eras and different phases and cycles of my life and like get interested in different things. And I just could never see myself being like, this is my one thing. Like, this is the one thing that I talk about. Like, I just couldn't. Like, I love too much.
And this comes back to probably the beauty of having a podcast because then you can just bring on people who spent 20 plus years talking to Himalayan workers. I don't even know, and see
Yeah.
how what their life is like.
Yeah, no, I do love that about podcasting is being able to be that bridge to open up conversations. Like, I think something that you can probably relate to, I feel like one of my superpowers is like curiosity. And I think that in itself is like an expertise. Like, to know how to ask the right questions is not something that everybody can do. And I really feel like that's something I've been cultivating since I was super young. Like, I was always the therapist friend for all my friends growing up. Like even in like just like elementary school, middle school, like I feel like my friends would come to me and I would just ask them questions. Like I wouldn't put in my input or what I thought unless they asked me. And it's not like I had the tools and skills that I have now. It's not that I knew how to do that. It's like internally, like my inner being knew that that's what they needed was to just have somebody to be curious and to talk things out with and to externally process. And I feel like that in itself is an expertise and a gift. And it might not be like one thing, but I think curiosity is like a skill that you develop, you know, asking the right
Oh, for
questions.
sure.
I think you're really good at
Oh,
that too.
thank you. Appreciate it. I yeah, it's something I've certainly noticed over time, especially when I'm interested in a new idea. It's like, okay, how does that work? Why is this happening that way? How does this relate to that? And then I think that's the next level of it though, is asking questions, is being able to see the interconnectivity of it all. Like there's a good question,
Yeah.
but then you can kind of see how it's like, oh, we were talking about that earlier. This relates back to that. And there's like this weird
Mhm.
little kind of dance that goes on with it.
Yeah, I think that's also my favorite part about having guests on is connecting the dots. Like I had some friends on my podcast back in October, but it didn't premiere till this week, and they have an experience that I cannot relate to at all, which is always interesting. Like when you have people on your podcast where you can speak on the topic as well, and then some conversations where you really can't. And like this, for example, was about them growing up Hawaiian in a predominantly white community and growing up in diaspora is what it's called, like the phrase, and the impact that that had on shame in their life and the inner child healing they had to do and just like something that I can never relate to as a white woman. Like, and I'm not going to put in my sense because like put in my thoughts there because I don't have that experience. That isn't my experience. So it was really cool having them on because like it was definitely a moment where it wasn't time for me to put in my thoughts, but what I could do was take everything that they were saying and repeating it back to them in a way that connected the dots and made sense for them. And when they listened back this past week, because it had been so long since they recorded, they like both texted me and they're like, Kayla, like that was so good. And like just the way that you connected the dots, like especially at the end, really helped, really helped us like process things that we didn't know we needed to process because we were just externally processing and speaking our experience, and like you zoomed out and like gave us this like bigger picture of how it all interconnected, because we talked about art and shame and inner child healing and diaspora and like so many different topics that all conjoined into one. And I think that is like so mad. It's one of my favorite things too. I love to connect the dots.
It's
Like
amazing.
give me all the dots, let me
And then
connect
once they
them.
line up, you have this like aha moment. That's always a fun little one.
Yeah. I lo I love the aha moment.
Yeah.
It's like the best feeling, and like for other people, because I feel like I'm always experiencing aha moments a little bit. Like it's just I just am always thinking, and then like naturally just connecting the dots. I think it's a gift, but I also think it's a muscle.
Mm.
And I think it's something that as you practice it, it gets better and better. And I think some people have a calling to explore that muscle and other people don't. Um, but I'm always like in my notes app, like writing down my aha moments. That is one thing I will always say to people is like write down your ideas. Like when it comes to you, don't think I'll remember that. You're not going to remember it. Like it is going to pass you by, especially if it's like a brilliant idea and a download. Like it just might leave and you're going to know that it was brilliant, but you're not going to know exactly what it was. Like write down your ideas. Like it is so important. And I'm a strong believer that ideas choose us. Like I truly believe that ideas are consciousness. And they're just little consciousness floating around and they choose you because they believe that you have the ability to manifest that specific idea that so badly wants to come into earth, that so badly wants to come into this 3D world. It believes in you. And when I realized that, and when I learned that our ideas choose us, I never wanted to ignore my ideas ever again, because I realized they chose me because they thought I have the ability to do this, and the ideas believe in me. So like I should believe in the ideas.
Right.
I don't know if that makes
No, it
sense,
does.
but
Have you? I think it's
yeah.
Carl Jung. Have you heard of Carl Jung?
Yes, I've heard of
I
Carl
think it's
Jung.
his quote. Let me see. I want to make sure it's his quote before I say it. Uh, what is it? Well, the quote is that people don't have ideas; ideas have people.
Wait, that's amazing. I love that.
Ideas have people. Let me make sure that it's his before we explore that. I'm pretty sure it's Carl Jung. Yeah, Carl Jung. People don't have ideas; ideas have people. And
Yeah, that's amazing. I've never heard that quote before, and I'm so grateful you
yeah,
told it to me.
it's a great one. It's he has a lot of great quotes actually. There's one of his that I want to get tattooed on my arm, which is you'll probably be able to relate to this, which is no tree's branches can reach into heaven without its roots reaching down to hell.
Mm, wow, I love that. That reminds me of like the water lilies too, and like how like they're so beautiful, but they like grow in the dirt and the mud.
Oh,
That also reminds me of that.
well, let's go.
Like that visual came to mind. That's a good
Let's see.
quote.
Yeah. Well, so going back to the ideas thing, it's interesting you say that because I know in my life there was like a my buddy and I had this idea. I was in college at the time, so it was probably I don't know, 8, 10 years ago. Excuse me. And the idea was is to have a kind of like a credit card or at least a QR code, which whenever you scanned it, it would populate everybody's social media accounts. So you would have Facebook, you would have Instagram, you would have, I don't remember what was all big 10 years ago, but nowadays it would be like TikTok, it would be this, it'd be that. And recently I kind of got targeted for that exact same thing. And now there's like probably 3 or 4 different brands out there that have these cards where like if you scan it, it would basically pull up like their link tree, which is like a very simple idea, but we had this idea 10 years ago. And so that little thing kind of reminded me of exactly what you're saying is like there's almost like this idea cloud, if you will, And at every given moment, we're kind of like tapped into it, and it's kind of giving the little downloads to whoever needs to pick them up at the right time. And then it's really like your choice if you take action on that idea or not.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's actually super interesting because, like, if you look back in history, it's like certain indigenous, like, peoples from like everywhere from like Hawaii
Are you
to
about to talk of
Native
inventions?
Americans to
Are you,
Ireland. Yes, yes,
yeah.
like they literally all were created around the same time, but with places that had no communication. And it's like, if that doesn't show you that ideas are consciousness, then I don't know what is. Like, I mean, the reason I really got into this concept was the book Big Magic. Who have you heard of
I
that
don't think
book?
so. I'll write it down.
It's by the author of Eat, Pray, Love, but it's about like creativity and ideas and like bringing them into reality. And she tells this story of how she had this very specific story that she was writing, this book, and it had to do with like this like sailor in Africa. I don't remember the exact story, but it was very specific, like a very specific story. And then she met up with her writer friend and they connected. And then 6 months later, they connected again. And at this point, she had already kind of moved on from this story that she was creating. She decided it wasn't really worth her time. She didn't really want to do it anymore. She didn't really have creative inspiration for it. She was just done. Like, she decided to let go of the idea. And then she meets up with her writer friend again, and she's like, I'm writing this book, and I love this idea, and it's amazing. And her friend starts telling her about the book, and it's the exact same fucking idea. And then they went back
Whoa.
and they saw they like went back in their archives of their writing and saw when when the girl started writing the book, or like had the idea, like first started like thinking about it, and when the other girl dropped it. And they were literally at like around like the same like week and a half, right around the time they met up 6 months before. And
Wow.
literally that story changed my life because that's what when I realized that ideas choose us. And she doesn't really go into this that far in the book. Like, she doesn't dive into it. The book was had lots of good pieces, but it didn't complete anything for me. But what it did was give me a lot of my own personal downloads, which I'm always grateful when books do that. Um like, at the end it kind of got repetitive. So it's not like a book where I'm like, this is the most amazing book ever. Like, it's not necessarily that, but this one part of it absolutely changed my life forever. I tell people about this concept all the time. I'm always talking about it. Like, I had all my friends read the book just so that they could get to this like wow moment of her realizing that this idea chose her, and then she let it go, and then it chose somebody else. And that's why it's like, so I don't, and like, people will get mad at other people because they're like, oh, I came up with that idea like 5 years ago and you stole it. And she's like, nah, dude, you just had the same idea. Like, it just wants to come into the physical form. Like, these ideas want to manifest, they want to come here, they
Right.
want to be 3D, and they're going to choose whoever is going to make it happen. And I just began to honor my ideas so much more and take so much like action on them, because I'm like, well, if someone doesn't do this, like, if I don't do this, someone else is going to do this, and then they're going to like, get fucking rich from it. I'm gonna miss out on the opportunity. And this idea thinks I'm great, and this idea thinks I can do it. So I'm gonna do it.
That's a good. That's an interesting point. I mean, because I do have those downloads all the time with different TikTok ideas or different real ideas, and I know after I kind of like, because I have a piece of paper where I kind of like write down ideas that I have, but then sometimes it takes time for me to just actually act on them. But then it's interesting because sometimes I see them pop up on my feed where someone makes the exact same video that I was like thinking of, and I'm like, there's a piece of me that kind of dies whenever I see it, and I'm kind of like, there's no point to make it now. And there's an argument for that. There is still a point to make it, but it's just like it's that feeling of like, damn, I should have made that earlier, or because now I've kind of lost some of that momentum now that I've seen someone else create it. But it's
Yeah.
certainly, yeah.
I also, to what you're saying, like, momentum and creation are one of the most conjoined things. Like, once you have an idea, it is so important to act on it within the first couple weeks that you generate this idea. Because if you think about it, like, the idea is energy. Like, you are conserving and creating that energy, and you want it to come out powerfully, but if you let it dwindle, then it's not going to be as powerful.
Mm,
And I'm definitely an action girly. Like, I just love taking action on the things that I want. And really, what I do actionably is I'll go to my journal and I'll write down the big idea. And then I'll be like, how do I break this down into the smallest steps possible? And there's like this visual that my psychic medium showed me once. And it really summarizes how I feel. It's like two ladders, and there's a ladder that has like a bunch of big steps, and then there's a ladder that has like so many really small steps. And the guy that's on the ladder with all the big steps is still reaching for the top one. And he's like, I can't get there. But the one that has like the small stair ladder is already at the top. And we think our ideas are these like huge things that feel unattainable, and they're like so big and so scary, and to take action on them, like, how could I start at 0 and go to 100? Like, how do I even get there? So much to the point where it's like debilitating. Like, we don't want to take the next step because like the final outcome seems so far away. And it's like, of course it's far away. Like, good things take like lots of energy and time and small steps. And like, for all my friends and like all my community members who are like, well, how do I like create this idea? Like, how do I just do it? Like, it feels so big. And I'm like, you have to break it down into the smallest steps. Like, you break it down into the smallest steps, and then you take the first smallest step, and then you break that down into 10 steps, because
mm.
really everything takes like little small tiny little actions, and then eventually you have your creation. Like, and that is definitely one of the most actionable things like I love to teach people is like, break it down, and then take that breakdown and break it down even farther. Like, I don't know, do you have a process that you use to like bring your ideas to life, or like what would you say your advice for that would be?
I guess it would depend on the idea. I think,
Hmm.
for the reels things, I just kind of like have the idea, and then like I know the process with it. So I know, like, if I have just like a general idea, I'll kind of write the skit for it, and then I'll go and make the certain things, and then this and then that. But, I think there's probably the visualization I'm kind of getting right now is like looking at the big picture, right? It's like, what do you want to do, right? You want to say, make something ridiculous, like $1 billion company. And it's like just if you hold that as your thought, my thought process is always just like, if you hold that as your only goal, you're never going to get there. Like, it's so that's so the magnitude of that is so large that you're just going to find you're going to quit. You're going to quit before you even start, because it's just like, it's so daunting, right? 10,000 people you're going to have to hire, probably more. You can go down the entire list of that. And so I think, to your point, it's there's a level of breaking down the steps in order to get to the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? It's like, well, if you're going to have a $10 billion company, at some point you need to make $10. So focus on getting that first dollar, and then just kind of
Yes.
like reiterate, all right, how are you going to get that first dollar? And I guarantee you, majority of people, even at that step, don't even know how they would get that first dollar. And it's like, oh, well, like, look, it's like, great, you had that ambition for 10 billion, but like, you got to be able to make $1 if you're going to get to 10. So
Uh-huh.
it's certainly breaking down the steps, and I guess it's going to change whatever it is, piece by piece. I know a lot of people kind of focus on, like, if you want to make, $100, or let's say, because it'll be an easy number, $365,000 in a year, then you need to make $1,000 a day. And that's, even that could be like intimidating. And so it's like, how do you make $1,000 a day? It's like, you kind of have to keep breaking it down. And I guess I feel a little bit not confident in what I'm about to say, but I do believe it to be true, which is, you need to break it down to a point where, like, it's a little bit scary, but you're at least willing to take that step. You need to at least break it down to, like, $1,000 a day is like, okay, I'll do that. It's not like, it doesn't have that energy of like, oh shit, like it's so large that it's kind of just abstract, and it's out there, and it's not going to energize you to take that step forward, right? Like $10 billion, for instance, would be the same thing. It's so large and abstract that it's not energizing you, right? But if you're like, hey, I bet you can't make I'm trying to think of something that's more attainable, maybe to myself. If it's like, make $1,000 a day, like, that seems like a lot to me. So like, that could be,
That seems like a lot to me too.
yeah. So like, if it's not if it's so big that it's unobtainable, or like you just mentally can't conceive it, then it's kind of just an abstract thought, as we're talking about, an
Mhm.
abstract idea that it isn't anchored in like actual emotion, which is what you kind of need. Like you kind of need that emotional pull towards it, right? Like
Mhm.
even with the reels ideas, is like I need an emotional pull to actually make the video, because if I don't have that emotional pull, then it doesn't matter how great the script is. It doesn't matter any of it, because the energy, like we were talking about earlier, that I'm putting into my words, that I'm putting into the pictures, it's just going to fall flat on its face, because it doesn't have that energetic, like, oh, like that excites me energy.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to act on our impulses. Like, and it does depend on the person, but for me personally, like that's why it's so important to act on the ideas when they come, because like then there is that energy, there is that emotional urgency, there
Mm,
is that impulse. And our impulses, like, yes, they can hurt us, but also they can really fucking help us and guide us. And like sometimes they're just like a little ring that we need to like step into something new. And something that also came up for me when you were talking about that is there needs to be this like perfectly, like not perfect, but like a really well balanced tension, because it can't be so easy that it's not interesting to you, and it can't be so out of reach that it's it's unattainable and you just feel like defeated before you even begin. Like there needs to be this perfect place of tension, like I'm seeing like a visual of a string being pulled in both directions, and if one side's, too much, or one side's, it's going to go the other way, or if the string is not getting enough tension on both sides, the string, you can't walk across it because it's going to like fall in the middle, as strings do. And I see this perfect tension between like you need to take the leap of faith, but you also need to somewhat know that it's possible. Like, and that's why also like mental rehearsing through visualization, through tapping, through affirmations, through like the mental rehearsing is so important, because you can kind of push yourself a little bit on that leap of faith. And but there also needs to be, it can't be too easy, but it can't be too hard, in the simplest terms. There needs to be like that really perfect tension for you to like walk across the tightrope, basically, if that makes
oh, for
sense.
sure. I was kind of visualizing it as like kind of the ropes in your mind, and like if one side pulls too hard, then it's going to just slip out of your mind and just kind of go off somewhere else.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. And I feel like that's something I also love to talk about, is that leap of faith, because I feel like there's so many moments in everyone's lives where you are tested with that moment of faith and trust. Just like, for example, when I did the podcast on my own, I poured so much into it, traveled to LA, traveled to Oahu, spent all my money. I did not have money to spend. Like, I didn't have like money from the podcast. Like, it's all out of my own pocket, like to record with these guests and like to travel to do it so I could like go places in real life. Cause I really just like was like, I know this is what I need. And not knowing if it's gonna work out and like having the doubt and doing it anyway, that is bravery. And there's always gonna be those moments. And the reality is like not everyone's going to take that leap of faith. Like I wish they would, but not everybody is going to in like this certain lifetime. Like they're not going to take that leap of faith for themselves, and they're going to play it safe. And if you are somebody who can take that leap of faith, that trust fall, that moment of uncertainty, that moment of doubt, that moment of I don't know if this is going to work out, but I'm going to go for it anyway, that'll take you so far. Then I mean, I hate to like just like continue to compare it to other people, but it'll take you so much farther than most people. Like I feel like literally there's like a statistic. I'm like I want to Google it. Just about like
I can
how many
Google
people
for
will
you.
actually like how many people will actually like act. I've heard the statistic before, but it's like literally like less than 1% of people will, or like less than 5% will actually act on their ideas and like actually try to like bring it to life. And if you can just like take that leap of faith, like that'll take you so far. Like I'm really trying to get my best friend right now to take this leap of faith and quit her job. And I've been trying for like a year, and she's finally doing it. And I just know, I just like can't wait for her to like have her fucking success story, because I'm going to use that as such a good example in my own work, because I've just known for so long that she has to like take this leap of faith, quit her job, like go against like the stability and the safety that she like craves, that we all crave,
Yeah.
like from an evolutionary point of view, we all crave the security and safety. And yet we have to go against it sometimes. And like that is pure bravery.
Yeah, that's a big part of my story, is like quitting a software engineering job to start this podcast and travel the world. Um, which we can
Wow.
talk about in a second, but I want to read this article that
Yeah.
I found, and it's not exactly what you were saying, but it's definitely on the money. It's pretty close, which is, the title is Science says only 8% of people actually achieve their goals. And the big takeaways is number one is that they begin with the end in mind. Um, so you have to know where you're headed. It talks about breaking it down. They build a support system around them, which I'm sure is highly underrated. They set specific and challenging goals, kind of like what we were discussing. They recognize when they're procrastinating, which is interesting. Yeah, they have a whole paragraph here, which I don't feel like really reading, but there's a 52-17 rule, 52 minutes of work followed by 17 minutes of test, what is unknown. They listen to music for focus. They don't multitask. And those were the 7 things that this website says, inc.com. So, yeah. So 8%.
I don't know if I believe in that whole multitask thing. I'm a neurodivergent mind. My mind is constantly bouncing. But I will sit down and I'll be like, Kayla, you can't get up for any other task until this one is done. And I'll like
Yeah.
do that with myself. But also, I think there is power in bouncing around sometimes and like having that ability to like bounce from thing to thing. And I feel like it really depends on people's minds and how they operate. I just know that, I mean, I'm not like I'm not diagnosed, but like I know that like I could be diagnosed if I want to with ADHD, and I know that my mind is like very neurodivergent, mostly because of the pace that I talk. Like you can kind of tell how it
I
be
can I
like if
can tell
people
just
speak.
based off of our conversation. I've I've had enough conversations on this podcast where I can tell just based off of, like, I don't really need to cue you. Like, some people need a cue of a question. Like, if I'll just like talk, and then sometimes people will just sit there and not say anything. But like with you, I don't need to end the conversation with a question. Like, if I'm done saying something, you'll know to pick up, and like you'll have something to kind of go off of it. And arguably it could be a part of the podcast. Like, you're also a podcaster, you get it. But I think it is that neurodivergent thinking where I have seen it with guests. And honestly, they're some of my favorite podcasts when I don't actually have to propose a question. I can just like finish my sentence and then they'll take it up after me.
That's super interesting because it's like I don't know how other people's brains operate, but while we're having this conversation and when you're speaking about something, like I am like writing down little notes because every time you say something, an idea comes to me that I might want to say or like speak
Mm.
about, like because what you said inspired me. And that's why I love podcasting and love conversations because my mind just loves that shit. And all my friends are neurodivergent baddies. Like all of them are like our conversations are crazy. Like we're all talking at once. Like there's so many ideas going on. Like we're bouncing from topic to topic. Like if I hang out one on one with a person, like if I haven't seen them in a while, we'll just be laughing so hard because we'll be like, wait, we didn't finish. We'll like start a story and then start talking about something else and then be like, oh shit, you need to finish telling me about that story. And we're just like bouncing all over the place. And like I literally like I don't know. It's just such a funny experience. That's so funny that you can notice though. But I think it's like bouncing around. I don't know. That article is interesting because I'm like, like
Well, it's kind of cool too, because whenever you talk about science, and this is a little bit of a pivot, right? But going off of that point, right, is like they're saying like you got to be multitasked, and here you are, you're saying like, I don't know if I truly believe that you don't have to be multitasked. It gets interesting when it comes to science, because I've never seen a scientific study specifically with human beings, right? Specifically in the psychological route of things, where it's 100% a certain way. There's always a small percentage of people who don't need to follow that. There are going to be a small percentage of people who maybe they don't need to follow that. Maybe they are successful and achieve their goals and don't do anything that are listed out on that sheet. And so this is kind of where I get like in the gray zone with science, which is look, there's things like physical science, like physics, where things are going to happen 100% of the time. In those situations, all for it. But whenever it gets to humans, it gets a little weird. Like, it's not always 100% anything.
Mhm. Yeah, I actually, before I got into spirituality, I remember being in religion and spirituality class in high school, which was a course like we had to get a certain amount of credits in that area. And um, I just remember like this concept coming up that I wrote about, and I just said that science is a religion. Like and this was like before I knew much about anything in this realm, but when we were, I don't know, I just began to realize that like, well, to believe in science, you have to like believe in everything else, right? It only makes sense if you believe in like the base of it. Not saying that I disagree with science. Like, I like science. I think science makes sense, but is it going to be true 100% of the time? No. And new things are being discovered all the time. So like what we know now is only based off of the information that we have, when in reality there is so much that is undiscovered that would create so many different truths, which is so cool that like there's so much coming out around like parallel universes and timelines and quantum physics, and that is like coming out like publicly in science now, even though it's like been talked about for hundreds of years. Like, it's just like kind of coming into more public information from like the government, like that there's that whole like, have you seen that? I'm sure you have.
What are you referring to?
Just like there's just like the documents coming out about like quantum physics like being real, proven by science, and like it's a government document.
Oh,
Have you seen that?
um,
Have you not seen that? Oh my god.
I guess I've always known quantum physics. I guess I'm not sure what your like proven by government. Is that what I should look up?
Yeah. Yeah. I can send you a video
All
afterwards
right,
too.
please do. But
That'll
I
have the
guess
document.
dive into this because I don't know. I guess like in my mind, I'm like, okay, we've known quantum physics, but then it's like, are you saying did the government know earlier? What's going on?
Yeah, just like documents like being released that show that they've been doing research to prove that it's like exists, basically.
Oh, that they've been just researching this
That
for a
like the
long time.
Yeah, but like like just like them coming out to like public knowledge. I haven't read the documents, but I just like went down like a whole of videos of
Okay.
people debriefing them. Um, but
I'll have to look into this. You'll have to
yeah,
send me the
I
videos.
think you would be very interested. That seems like something that you would be interested in.
I'm all
What is like
ears.
your favorite things? What is your like favorite areas to talk about? Like, if you were to go on somebody's podcast, like what do you think you guys would talk about?
I've talked about a lot of different things. Again, this kind of goes back to where I don't really specialize in anything. The real big thing I think I'm kind of diving into right about now is yoga, but like it's I guess technically Raja yoga, which is like more of like Indian. It's like a mixture of hatha yoga and asana, and there's another one. Oh, Kriya yoga. So these are all like different ways of aligning the mind and body in order to kind of get more in tuned with what is God consciousness or like communion with God of what they describe. It's something I'm really new to like learning right now, but it's definitely something I'm like kind of diving into and learning a lot more about. And it's crazy. The what is it? The thing There are things that are laid out in Hinduism that are, and even Buddhism for that matter, which have talked about the idea of like quantum physics for millennia. They just described it slightly different, but they talked about how, the idea of entanglement, the idea of multiple dimensions. I mean, even Hinduism, like some of their most sacred texts, even talk about how like the universe forms, it expands, and then it contracts, and it like they go down like this whole thing about how like the time frame of it, how long these things occur, and um all of this to kind of get away from the original question, which was what would I normally talk about? I talk about a bunch of different stuff. I love going down conspiracies. I've talked about that on
Oh
one
yeah.
of my podcasts recently. uh I'm very much a questioner. I very much question a lot of things and try to see where all the puzzle pieces put together. There's a really beautiful uh, I forget if it was said by like someone in Hindu culture or something, where they kind of pointed out how, it's difficult to kind of talk about God because each one of us has a piece of God within us. So we're all trying to articulate this mosaic structure that we can only see a fraction of. And that fraction, how small it is so immensely small, it's crazy. And we tried to articulate that, but then we can find people who agree at some level of our experience, and that's kind of where like the formation of a religion almost kind of becomes embodied. Where I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I feel like I'm just rambling. So to make a long answer short, there's really just a lot of things. I've gone down many different rabbit holes of time being an illusion. I've talked about, different alien like beings, but I kind of approach it from more of this concept of like not really saying things are factual, but at least opening up people's minds to the possibility of it. Because I find that there is this interesting dilemma that we have as humans where we tend to categorize things as being possible and not possible, or possible and impossible. And I'm really getting to this point that I don't believe anything is impossible, and it's mainly just our conception of whether or not it being possible. Like, maybe that didn't make sense, but
No, it
it
made
makes
sense.
okay, cool. So you can just move past that for a sec then.
No, that made sense. I really like that because I mean, I don't know. There's just so much unexplored. How can you say that something is to not exist when there is so much that, you know, we have yet to explore? Like we're out here like exploring the cosmos and like people are exploring space and everything. And yet no one is really, I mean, not no one, somebody's probably doing it, but the ocean, like there's like just like how little we know about like the ocean and how like little is explored, like just even that in itself I feel like is such an example to me always that like we know nothing. Like that, like we just know nothing. Like if we don't know like our own ocean then we like know
Right.
nothing, like which is always like a wake up call to me.
Well,
So
it comes to this.
I'm there with you where I'm just
Yeah,
like,
it comes
yeah.
like this interesting. Here's where I was gonna try to go with it, which was talking about like that leap of faith, right? Like there's an element of us that needs to stay grounded and stay centered in like what we know is true, what we believe is true. And I think science has, especially in Western ideology, is that's where it's like become very concrete, which is like, here's the scientific principles, here's why the earth is circulating the moon, da 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 da. But then there's this element of needing to stay open and curious of, well, what if? Like, if this is true, then what else would need to be true to validate this other thing? And I believe that, especially in science, that there seems to have been, and it seems to be changing, but maybe it's just where I'm at in my life, this dogmatic approach to science where it's like, we can't break out of the structure of our own thinking far enough to allow new ideas in. And it takes a little bit of being curious mixed with, takes an element of being curious mixed with being able to have a crazy idea that other people might laugh at in order for you to expand the possibility of awareness for everybody else. And I think a piece of my journey is to at least make that okay for people to say, well, what if? Take the craziest conspiracy theories you want, right? What if we didn't land on the moon? What if, um, I don't know, uh, I'm kind of having a hard time because I always think there's some. What if the Earth is flat? That's always a fun one.
Right.
Um, I had that was actually that's a whole other side story. Don't believe it. Earth is round, people. It's I know that the Earth is round. I'll put it that way. But the point is, though, is I think that there's a beauty in being able to at least explore the craziest ideas, to at least open up your mind to why people think that those exist in the first place.
Yeah, well, nothing can be, I mean, nothing that's ever been discovered that we now claim as truth, like, was once just a crazy idea that people didn't believe. I feel like that's the story with like everything that we know now with science is like once upon a time people didn't believe that, and that was a crazy outlandish idea. And that's like really where like the change makers come into play, because people have to like be brave enough to almost kind of seem crazy or deemed crazy. But in reality, I feel like it would be crazy to just trust everything that we are told. I don't know. I've always been very like skeptical, like for sure, of everything. And I think there's power in that, because if we can get a little skeptical, we can get a little
For
curious,
sure.
like so much can come out of it that we wouldn't otherwise be able to. I don't know. Also, I just love like watching other people and just like realizing like that they're acting on what they believe is truth. And then what I think is truth might be so different. And then I'm always just like, wait, we're just all out here like acting on what we think is truth. And definitely one of my greatest like powers, I feel like, is coming back to the fact that I don't really know if I know anything. And I think that's a really good thing to think. I feel like it's very humbling to realize how little all of us know. And the people that like just really think that their truth is the only truth are like the scariest kind of people. Like those are the people that I don't want to be around. Like I don't like being around people that think that their truth is the only truth, because I'm just like, but what if? Like, I can think something's true, and also I can explore a possibility of something else. And I think I love to be around people who are also like that, who are like, okay, like, well, I don't really think what you're saying is truth, but I'm interesting to explore that idea for sure. Because if we don't question what we know, then we'll never have the possibility to know anything greater
Yeah, how do you
than our
expand?
current
Yeah,
reality. How do you
there's
expand?
no room for expansion.
Yeah. No, I want to talk to you one day about your conspiracy theories because I'm like, that's so fun. Like, I mean, I never, I tried to dive in, but never dive too far in, because like I don't want to like go crazy.
You certainly,
Like I'm like good question, but like not too much.
yeah.
Like you gotta like, I don't know, some like to a point, like we are in this current reality, and like I like to play along, like with a conscious awareness that I could not play along if I wanted to, but like I'm like down to play along sometimes. I'm like,
it,
okay, I'm this
it's
little kid.
interesting. I'm seeing so many parallels between us, and I'm seeing another one, which I think is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have it. You might. I'm saying this because I see it in myself, so I could be projecting on you here.
Okay,
Where I'll say, okay, I have this. I'll say this as I have this, and you can say if you have it as well.
I won't be. I don't get offended if that's what you think
Oh,
is
no,
gonna
no, no, no.
happen. Just
I just didn't wanna, like I
okay.
didn't wanna put something on you and it come across as just, like, I
Okay.
don't know. Where I tend to, like, be so wanting to believe certain things that it would put me down into a, like, not like almost like a pitfall at some level. So, like, a perfect example would be like a make $1 million in 10 days sort of thing. Like, I would be the person that is so, like, I want that to be true, that I'll just like invest myself in it until like 20 red flags go past me, and then I'm like, "Oh shit, I got duped." So like I don't know if that's you as well, but
Hmm. I think that
and that felt extreme.
I
That was an
actually think
extreme version of that as well.
no, that was extreme. No, but like I kind of understand what you mean. I would definitely say that I can be that way, but like rarely. Like I actually like can, even though I'm like love to think far out, like I actually get really grounded and like get like I can be pretty like, I guess realistic is the only word that I can think about. Um and I don't know, I guess just like especially in terms of like business, I guess I just like value my fun and my play so much. And like maybe that's something we can talk about, because that's a really big part of the message that I want to create in the world, is like this power of play and this power of fun, and how that is my priority. Like, and if something is going to really pull, like I love my business and I love everything and I want it to be fun, and I but it's not always going to be that. But I think if anything is taking, oh, if I'm like, so I can get fixated, like kind of like OCD, like I guess like I can get
Mm.
obsessive and compulsive about what I'm thinking of. Um, but I just have learned to like notice when I'm getting that way, kind of, and when I'm like diving too far in and being like, okay, if this is in any way taking away my peace, my joy, my play, then I tap out.
Mm.
And
Well,
like
so
I don't
this is an interesting
yeah.
thing, and so I kind of was bringing this up also to bring it back to conspiracy theories, which is what you're bringing up now, which is like that fun aspect. Like conspiracy theories, and I found this along the way, are so much fun. And I think there's probably this element of you feeling, and it's probably ego based a little bit, of like feeling like you know something that the general person doesn't know or doesn't believe. Yeah, that little like sway, like, oh yeah, like I
It
know.
is fun.
They're so fun. And so I think that is like a very enticing piece of them, that is also like one of those like little cautionary flags as you get into it, of like, okay, this would be cool if it was real. Like, well, and then your mind, because it's so powerful, will actually seek out things to validate that it actually occurred.
Mm. Oh yeah. And that's like you can take that with conspiracy theories and then you can bring it back to like real world applicable how you see your reality. Like when you decide something is somewhat truth in an aspect, your mind is going to create everything that it can and any type of meaning to match that current reality. And that's the beauty of momentum when it comes to like we were talking about before, like lack versus like abundance mindset. Like because if you are so far in lack, like you just don't have enough and like the world is against you and just like nothing is ever working out for you, like we are going to be constantly creating situations and scenarios that support that belief because I mean at the end of the day, like so many of us, like not going to say all of us, but like majority of people want to be right because to feel right is to feel safe, to predict, to have life be predictable, to know what's going on is to have that safety, which is really like the purpose of the
Feeds it.
ego and the purpose of the evolutionary mind. And then same thing when we can fall down the momentum of that, we can also fall down the momentum of just like abundance and like everything really is working out for me. And then you look around you and you see that everything is lining up for you. And like people are coming into your life who are like giving you life changing advice and like, you know, assistance is coming in and like those ideas are flowing and you also are creating meaning and proof and evidence to support that abundant reality. And whenever people are like, Kayla, like, how do I change my mindset? Because that's a question I get a lot. Like, people are like, how the fuck do I change my mindset? Like, how do I actually do it? And I always say, like, you need to give your brain the proof. Like, the brain just wants proof. Like, it just wants
Mm,
evidence because, like, evidence in some way feels concrete. So, whenever I'm feeling like, you know, that illusion of fear coming in, being like, you're not good enough, what you're doing is shit, you're not going anywhere, when those illusions come in, I literally will go to my journal. I'll be like, I'm going to think of every single thing that I can to prove to myself from the past that actually things are working out for me and alignments have been made and connections are happening for me. And I've actually gotten pretty like quote, like for lack of a better word, like lucky, I guess. Like things are happening for me and I'll go down and I'll write down all the things. And when you shift into that place, it shifts you into gratitude, which like we're looking at the emotional guidance scale, like joy, gratitude, play, like that is the highest vibration you can achieve. Like that, not achieve, that's not the right word. That was my Aries in me. Being like, I will achieve the high vibration that you can embody, you know? Like, and whenever people ask me that, I'm just like, you have to create the proof and you have to create the evidence because that is going to be able to almost trick your brain. That's like the little fake it till you make it moment. Like before I had the words to express manifestation and the words to express like attracting things into your life, like I would just be like, when people ask me how I was confident, I would be like, oh, fake it till you make it, which is like such a simplistic term. But like looking back at my younger self, I'm like, that girl knew, like she knew what was up. Like she was just creating this evidence in her head that she was confident and she was gonna like
mm.
get the thing she wanted to get or like whatever it was that I wanted at the time. Like, and that's like proof and evidence. That shit is powerful on both
Oh yeah.
ways. You know, it can take you not in both ways because it's not even either or. It's like a million ways. Like it's a circle. It's not like a line. It's like a circle. Like it can pull you in so many different directions. And I definitely think like yeah, with conspiracy theories, like you know, you like will create that proof like around you just like subconsciously because your brain just wants to be right. Like that's one of the biggest things I've realized in therapy. I was just like, damn, I do a lot of shit I'll own my shit to be right. Like I will really do whatever I can to be right. And we can use that to our advantage. Understanding our brain, understanding our ego, understanding the evolutionary minds and its function and its purpose, we can use it to our advantage. And that's why I love talking about this stuff, because I'm like, people just don't know. Like they don't know, like even though, people like us know that like safety is the main priority, so we got to create familiarity and predictability to create safety, and that's a way that we can work with our ego. We're not trying to get rid of our ego. Like, I mean, maybe some people are, and everyone's like, I'm having my ego death. And I'm like, well, I believe that I'm a divine being, and the divine would not have given me this ego if it wasn't supposed to be here for some reason. So I like to work with my ego. Like I like to befriend my ego and reason with my ego and sometimes even trick my ego sometimes. And that's why like I love talking about this stuff, because I didn't know before. Like I didn't know that I was doing everything I was doing because I felt unsafe, and it really does come down to that. Like that's like one of the core woundings we have as humans, is this safety. And it can come from past lives, it can come from this life, like, and I'm all about the proof. I'm all about the evidence. I know that wasn't what we were talking about, but the neurodivergent in me
Sorry.
came in and was like, I have to say this. Like, I have it. Like, I have to say this.
Yeah. You keep hinting at the past lives, and honestly, it was one of the things that I wanted to discuss, but I don't know if we're gonna have the time to do it. So we're gonna might have to say that for a Kayla part two at some point here.
Okay.
But I did want to kind of touch on the what you were kind of what was coming through in that whole thing you were saying there, which was kind of the aspect of being honest and truthful with yourself, where you're kind of dropping all these things of, oh, I can see that she was doing these things back then, or even the knowledge of whenever it is ego based, like, oh, I was using my ego to do this and this at this time. And you don't, like, it's interesting, there's times where you can kind of sit there and be like, I did that out of ego, or I did that out of soul. But if you're not truly being honest with yourself or the people around you, you really don't know. And it's almost like, I guess I've seen this in my life, where truth is kind of that, it's something you almost need to practice so that you can feel when you're being as honest as you can be with yourself in a given moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I also think having other people around you who can call you out when you're bullshitting yourself is really important. Like, I love the friends that I can come to and I'm having a fight with my boyfriend and I'm like, well, I did this, he said this, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like trying to justify my actions and everything. And they can look at me and they're going to be like, bitch, you fucked up. Like, you messed up. Like, or my therapist, you could just be like, don't lie to me. Like, that wasn't your intention. Like, it's so important to know that for yourself, but I feel like not everyone knows how to do that. So that's why sometimes having just real ass people in your circle who are going to like call you out when necessary and support you when necessary, it is so important. You don't want people around you who are yes men. Like, no, you want friends who are going to be able to be real with you. Like, and that definitely helps me in moments. And I do think it's like a muscle. Like the more that you practice, like being honest with yourself, and like I call it owning my shit, because that's what my therapist calls it.
I like it.
And yeah, owning my shit. Like I'll own my shit any day. Like I said, like, and I'll say it to my parents too. I'll be like, I'll be like, that's not why you did that. Like, own your shit. Come on. Like, and I don't know. It's important to play too, and like it doesn't have to be so serious. Like healing and like this work and the shadow work, like it doesn't have to be. It is serious sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Like if we have people in our life that we can like joke around and play around with, it actually like softens the ego, and like the ego doesn't want to come up in defense if you're kind of like able to be more lighthearted about something and just be like, shit, I fucked up.
Right.
Like it calms the ego, because the ego doesn't feel like it needs to go into defense and protection mechanism when you kind of have that like lightheartedness. But I always call it owning my shit, and it really is practice. Like when I first started going to therapy, like I did not know how to own my shit. I did not know how to be wrong. I did not know how to apologize. Like I grew up
Those are
in a
big
household
ones.
where like no one apologizes. Like I don't like no one knows how to say the words I'm sorry. Like growing up, like I did not like, and I have empathy for the people in my life, like my parents who taught me that, because I just realized like it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery and a lot of knowing yourself super deeply and loving yourself unconditionally to be able to be wrong and to be able to apologize and to be able to be accountable. And it's just so much easier when you learn how to do it. Like I didn't know, and it was like really hurting me. And like luckily, like the people in my life, like, they were fine with it when I was like younger. But like now that I've grown out of it, not saying I don't go back to the pattern sometimes, but now for the most part, I can like really apologize and own when I was wrong. I really think that puts you back in to that radical responsibility that we talked about at the beginning, like that deep like empowerment for like, okay, I can fuck up and I can still love myself. And like that's probably been the one of the biggest blessings on this whole journey is like learning that, because I did not know before. I did not
It's
know.
really humbling when you can sit there and say, I didn't know.
Super.
Yeah. So what is it? I'm curious because it sounds like you kind of brought this up with your parents, especially like in the energy of telling them, "Hey, own your shit, mom, own your shit, dad." Because that's something I've seen myself where, there's, I mean, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So who knows better? Once you kind of go down this path, you start seeing like, oh shit, I got that from this parent. Oh, I got this from that parent. How do you, I feel like, and maybe this is just because where I'm at in my journey is like, it feels very um incongruent with my way of being to have those kinds of conversations with my parents, but even more so to have like that fun energy because things have been, I don't want to say serious, but the energetic imprint of our relationship has found its groove for so long that it's almost difficult being around certain people. And this doesn't even have to be parents, being around a certain person and trying to recultivate that fun aspect within that relationship. So have you kind of found a way, maybe with parents or maybe with like other people that you've had in your life for a long time, where it's like, okay, I can tell that this dynamic is not of the highest vibration that it could be. So now I want to try to show up more. Does that kind of make sense where I'm going with that?
Yeah. Yeah, there is that structuring of like almost needing to reparent yourself when you realize you've been taught things that weren't in your best interest, but also forgiving your parents because they didn't know any better. I think I have a very interesting perspective because like my mom listens to my
Oh,
podcast.
same here.
And this has been this beautiful way for me to say how I feel and for her to really hear me. Like, I was never taught how to talk about emotions or hard things. Everything was all good, all great. Everything's great. Um, and I think my mom listening to my podcast has really transformed our relationship because she finally like can hear me, and she like finally will listen and like take it in and really be like, damn, like she's learning, like. And it's this beautiful like almost third person energy where if I were to come up and I were to tell her that to her face, like she would be defensive, her ego would come up, she wouldn't listen to me, she'd get annoyed with me and mad and just like brush me off. But if she hears it from me, but in third person, it hits. And our relationship has radically transformed because we'll share. She doesn't listen to just my podcast. We both listen to like Jay Shetty and Brene Brown are two people that we both listen to like all the episodes. So we'll get to like talk about that. And she's like, growing on her journey at like 65 years old. And it's like such a beautiful thing to see. And then like I have my other parent, like my dad, who I don't think he's gonna change in this lifetime, and like that's okay. Like I love him so much, and I have deep empathy for him, and I think he's a brilliant man. And sometimes when people are really smart, it can prevent them from healing because they're so intellectual. Like another triple air sign, like Gemini, Libra, rising Libra moon, like lots of intellectualizing going on, and with that relationship, like I've just learned like in the moments that it I can't change what he thinks. Like when we're having those conversations and we're not communicating on the same channel at all, I can't change what he thinks. And it's better to just walk away. And like I know my truth, and like I can work through it in therapy. And but there's no point in arguing or fighting about it or like trying to change him or trying to get him to see my perspective. Um, and that's okay. Like it's not everyone's uh like it's not everyone's time. It's not everyone's time to like evolve, um, especially after being stuck in certain ways for so long. And like I've come to this very interesting place where like my mom, I can joke. Like I like the other day, like she's like, "Oh, well, I did that nicely and like they didn't appreciate it." And I'm like, "Bullshit. You literally told me that you did that because you don't like her." I was like, "Own your shit." And she was like, kind of, you could see that she got defensive and then she was like
Yeah,
realized
yeah,
she
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so we can be playful um in that way, but like not necessarily with like my dad. And like that's totally okay. Like I've just learned a deep acceptance with that. And I'm also just like sit in the gratitude of I'm grateful that me and my mom have like been able to really improve our relationship and like really find ourselves on similar wavelengths. Like it just feels really good to see her transforming because it's definitely easier for me at 24 than her at 65 to go through deep internal transformations, like hers are more cemented. But she's also like Sagittarius energy. So like she has the ability to want truth and to stay curious. And um, I think, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it's just an interesting little perspective.
I don't know if it did or didn't, but there's a new question that come up, so I'm gonna jump to that one. What So you said in there that whenever your mom listens to your podcast, because my mom listens to mine as well, so we got that in common as well.
Mhm.
Add it to the
Yes.
commonality list. W-
Hey, moms.
Only person I think who's listened to every single episode of mine, so I'm thinking I gotta like, yeah.
Same. We gotta appreciate
Right? I
them.
think I got to bring her back on
Number one
to ask
fan.
questions, but
Yeah.
um, so mom, if you're listening, we're gonna plan that in the future. Uh, I know you're listening, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. You mentioned there though that whenever your mom would listen to it on your podcast, as opposed to you saying it in person, it would kind of resonate more with her. Or maybe you didn't say that exact words, but it would click more. Why do you think it is that she's able to hear you in a different way through your podcast versus in person?
I think it really comes back to like the ego. Like when you come to somebody with a criticism or a complaint or something that you want changed or something that they created within you because they're your parent and they have influenced you your entire life and you want to like talk about it, um that defense mechanism will come up. And that's just everyone. Like if you come with a criticism, the ego is going to come up to defend.
Alrighty, so we're back. You guys know the drill. The typical high energy cutout that we have here with this sometimes, but usually that means we're getting close on time. So, because
Yeah.
this all intuitive stuff works a certain way, and whenever the thing cuts out, it usually means okay, we gotta wrap this up. But let's finish
Yeah,
your thought.
fair.
You were talking about ego and kind of approaching your mom from
Oh,
that state.
yeah, I think like if I come to her directly, like it's a criticism and her ego's naturally going to come up. Like I can't shame her for that. Like that's everyone. That's what it's meant to do. And um there's like the deflecting of blame for sure. And I think when she hears me in third person, like I'm not talking directly to her. Like I'm talking so I can talk about her, but I'm not talking directly to her. And maybe like the ego comes up a little bit and the defense comes up a little bit, but I don't think why does that happen? I actually don't know. I gotta be honest. I don't know, but it is true. Like when she hears me in third person, her ego doesn't defend as much and she's able to soak it in. And I also think it gives her time to pause and to think about it. And then she'll bring it up to me a week later, being like, "Oh, when you said that in the podcast, like this is my thoughts on it," or things like that. Like it gives her time to process. And some people's brains, they process really fast and they can make connections like you and me like really fast, and then other people work from a more kinesthetic channel where they need time to process. They need time to think and to allow themselves to do some like soul searching, almost for lack of better terms. Like so I think it gives her a pause and time. And when you're talking to someone face to face, like you don't necessarily get that time to process how you feel about something. And processing is so important because, I mean, if someone comes at you, you're going to feel angry, but anger can only exist in the body for 90 seconds. And then after that, you're just reliving the thought and recreating the anger. But once it passed through your body in the 90 seconds, like, you have the ability to process it, and you don't react, you respond, when you
Mm.
have the ability to take time and pause. So I would probably say that's why, but I should ask her.
Beautiful,
I should.
beautiful conversation point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And see what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
so Kela Rose, thank you so much for being on. This was an incredible conversation, and we didn't even get to your amazing past lives. So it's telling me we're gonna have to do at least a second one some point in the future. No rush.
Mm.
It took us a couple months to just get this one. So
Oh,
um,
no, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's all right. No, again, it's I see it as it's these podcasts end up being the best ones in my opinion. I know people have their own opinions, but I mean, obviously my opinion is the most important, but
Facts.
but Kayla, the way I like to wrap up these podcasts, I love giving my guests the stage to plug your stuff. I have your links, so reference those down below. Let people know how they can get skinny dipping with you, and any words of encouragement that you have for people as well. The floor is yours.
Lovely. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for giving me such a long, beautiful space to talk. I feel like we had such an in depth conversation on things I never really talk about on podcasts. So I'm really excited to share this with my audience. And I'm really excited to have you as somebody I connect with because I think you're wonderful. I'm
Pleasure.
Kayla Rose. I am the podcast host of Skinny Dipping, where we talk about the mind, the body, and the soul in order to create actionable change in our lives. And I think a really good follow up episode to this one. Um, I feel like something that we didn't get to talk on that I'm very interested in that, I think people would love to hear from me is about nervous system regulation. And I have a whole episode on that on my podcast. And I think that would be a great follow up topic for this because I think we talked a lot about the mind and the ego. But that kind of dives into how we can process emotions in our body, which is a huge part in healing. So I think that would be a really good follow up conversation on skinny dipping, the podcast on nervous system regulation. And then you can find me on all platforms at Sundazed KK. Sundazed, like you're in the sun too long and you're tired, but you're happy. Sundazed KK, because I'm Kayla Rose. That's Kela Rose. And yeah, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, but mainly my podcast is my baby. And I absolutely love it so much. You know, I think if I were to say one thing, like following up this conversation, is we did a lot of talking about things that needed to be shifted and like things that we can change within ourselves and like that inner healing and that shadow work and that ego work. And I think all of that is so beautiful and not but and because it is both. It is the paradox. It is both. And I think that it is so important to remind you guys that you cannot hate yourselves into the change that you want to create, into the transformation you want to create. You can only love yourself through the evolution. Shame around how you're doing it, how you're living life, and what you're doing, and like really intellectualizing all the ego stuff. I feel like we can come from this point of like, oh, but this is not good, and I feel bad about it. Like I feel bad about who I am, and I think that does the exact opposite work that we want to do. And when you can come from a place of truly loving yourself into that deep evolution, that's where the magic happens and that's where the real change happens. So I just really wanted to finish off with that because we did a lot of talking about things that need to be shifted. But at the end of the day, like you can love yourself imperfectly. Like you can love yourself broken. Like you can love yourself when you're not at your highest self. Like you can love yourself through it all. And that's how you're going to create that evolution that you want to create for yourself. And that's where I'd like to leave off.
Beautiful. And you gave a lot of different techniques in this ETF tapping, this tapping stuff even.
Yes. EFT.
EFT. I've got another thing to even
Yes.
look in myself, so truly
I
grateful.
think you're gonna love it. Like
Yeah.
literally, it's amazing. Like it's amazing. EFT tapping will
Oh,
change your life.
I pulled
Get
up.
back to me in a couple months when
Okay.
you finally find your way to it.
All right. I think you'll know. Everything will just be so shifted that you'll just be like, "Oh, he's EFT tapping." You'll be like, "Oh,
Duh.
okay."
I think we both need to like challenge, commit, EFT tap every day. No, see, like even if you try just like one, I feel like you feel your energy shift pretty like quickly when I do it. I feel my energy shift. So
Okay.
I'll send you a little short one that you
Should we
could
make
do.
a challenge of some sort? A 30-day
Ha! I
challenge?
love a good challenge. I think like if once a week or like twice a week, you can either maybe like once a week you EFT tap once a week, and once a week you also do your question and answer journaling dive through. That would be a really good challenge. Like try
Okay.
both of those techniques throughout your week and see which one resonates most with you and which one transforms you most. I don't know.
Prescribed right here by Dr. Kela Rose.
Oh, I wish.
The little hair flick during it. Oh. Oh,
Oh,
you're too
doctor.
kind.
Oh, no, okay. Thank you so much for having me on. Seriously, I can't wait to share this conversation.
Thank you for being on. This was a great conversation. It's definitely one of those conversations that energizes me to keep doing this. So thank you.
Same. I like needed this today. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
needed to like have this like long conversation. I feel like I forget like how important they are to allow our subconscious mind to flow and to really get into the nitty gritty, like being here this long, like you just never know what's going to come up. And I feel like I like that. It's cool.
A lot of people have said similar things afterwards. Usually I've ended the podcast by the time they say that, so it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting thing where a lot of people put up apprehension, I think, to committing for that much time, but then afterwards everyone's always like, yeah, I need to do that more often. And I'm like, hey, well, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I have this
Yeah,
for people
no,
to do.
I like it. It's definitely like a cool like niche too to have like the very long podcast, and I think that if you stick with it, like it'll really stand out.
Appreciate it. Yeah. I'll get to Kayla Rose status soon. I just need to tap a little bit more.
You're great, Clayton. Like I swear to God, like you can't like other people's success because it's like such an illusion of like what you see and what I show you compared to what actually is going on.
You're right.
So, like I don't know, you never know what's going on behind closed doors. I'm constantly doubting myself.
Yeah, it's I go through that as well. I think it's probably a human universal thing here.
And also, there's people out there who are feeling the exact same way about you.
It's true. I know that's true.
Mhm.
I know it's true. It's crazy. It's
100%.
we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
The mountain is you. Get out of the fucking way. Move the fucking mountain. Okay.
All right.
Okay,
We'll wrap this up. We got to wrap this up. Kayla,
great.
we could do this for hours. I guess we already have been doing this for hours. We'll have to do it for
Yeah,
more hours in the future.
I hope so.
So Kayla, beautiful soul rolls. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Guys, go check out her stuff. Sundays KK on Instagram and everywhere else. Go strip down, dive in, because I know we for sure did that in this podcast. So go do it in hers. And
Yes.
if you don't, that's also totally cool, but we will have a chat about it whenever I see you guys in the sixth dimension.